Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I have, whoops, 6:00, I just went by it. Where's my clock? 6:00 up. 6:08. Roll call, please. Here.
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 Shut this off. So we are going to do a budget workshop. So you guys are on.
Sarah's going to do most of the talking, which is a good thing. But you'll notice that there's not next meeting. We're going to ask on the 24th to have a budget workshop, and we'll have all the detailed budgets in from all the departments in the schools. And Sarah's been meeting with principals, and actually they're due all by tomorrow. But there's changes, and I just want to clarify when we presented this. And again, the way the process worked, we didn't even get a chance to really meet with the committee first. We presented it to the committee and to the council at the same time, and we're clear about changes in variables. And so since that meeting, there have been changes, and we'll point those out. And we're hoping to come back, we will come back with a more detailed line-by-line budget with the budget books for everybody. We'll make them up also for the council members at our next meeting. So, but the reason we're having this is just to have an opportunity to talk about the changes and any concerns, but any concerns you have moving forward too, because we haven't had a chance to really dialogue. So you may look at it and say, hey, this looks like kind of like the same PowerPoint. Well, it is, except for where there's some changes that we're able to make and point out. So I just wanted to state that for the process.
Okay, so we'll go through, and because it's just us, if you have questions, we might as well just stop me, as we go along.
Okay.
But really, because of the way the timeline is working, so the principal budgets were due, I said I'd prefer them by the 4th, which was last week, but I gave them to the 11th because it is a lot of information, and they were pushing it down to their department heads, curriculum coordinators as well this year. So last year we pushed it to the principals, and this year they pushed it down a little bit further. So all of that takes time to go through. So we'll go through. There have been some updates that have come in. So just to go over the timeline again, we're still on track with what we had originally presented back on the 10th. And once those budgets come in, we'll start setting up meetings and going over them. I know Lori and I are going to be meeting with the high school and middle school to go over their budgets and staffing requests next week. And I'll meet with Dawn with the elementary principals as well to go over their requests. The big bid is a transportation bid. The bids are due on the 31st of January. We'll have an idea next week what companies are bidding. We've already had 4 requests, I believe, for proposals, so that's pretty good. At least that means that we'll get a little competition in, and it would be lovely if we could stay relatively where the contract costs are now and update our fleet, because I know that, with that much interest in the bid, they should be relatively competitive, so that's a very good thing for us. So some of the revenue assumptions that we have, the governor's budget will be released around the 17th as the preliminary budget. That won't obviously be finalized until it goes through the whole General Assembly, and also when we get our March 1st enrollment data. When I looked at the October 1st enrollment data and dropped those figures into the calculator, it did drop our projected increase from 1.85 million to 1.7 million. You'll see that on a future slide. So that 1.8 is already starting to dwindle. We are looking at the enrollment now. Usually October enrollment is high because all of the previous school years free and reduced lunch applications are still on file up through October 30 days after the start of school, so it's somewhere in that October timeframe. So I'll be working with Jim and Donna Hartman in the finance office to really go through those numbers and make sure that everybody's captured. We'll do student-to-student comparison, make sure that we're seeing drop-offs for those students that graduated last year, and then names that we're not seeing on the list, we might do a little bit further digging to make sure it was in fact a change in eligibility and we're not just missing them. We have sent out that free and reduced price lunch application again. Once the school committee adopted the school lunch policy, that went out with information as to what qualifies as a meal, and that application again to parents. So hopefully we'll start seeing some applications come in. But that is definitely a number that we're always nervous about because it has such a significant impact on our aid. The tuition revenues, I have that remaining consistent, although we do have, as of right now, 9 enrollees graduating from our CTE program, and so far we only have 2 applications on file that are definite. So it's very early in the year. Usually those don't come in until the March timeframe anyways, which is making this somewhat difficult. But for right now, I'm leaving the projections as the same. And as we get further information, and I'll probably have to make that decision, before that February 1st, when we have to provide the line item detailed budget, depending on what we have on hand at that point in time, I might have to drop that number as well. So this just gives you an idea of the change in the state education aid. So when the state releases their early state aid, they use the March 1st data from the previous fiscal year and then update it with what they anticipate the revenues will be coming out of the state. So you can see that we went from 4,670 and 1,405 on the free and reduced side down to 4,628, 1,428 on the free and reduced side as of October 1st. The total enrollment doesn't look too far off. It's the free and reduced number that I'm worried about because that seems like it's dropping, which doesn't really appear to make sense based on some of the demographics and other things that we're seeing in the schools. So we will dig into that further. But as you can see, even that slight change drops our state aid by $153,000. Still an increase, but drops our increase by $153,000.
Just to throw in that, every day we have registrations coming in, and depending on those registrations, like we have children that come in that are foster children will be automatically qualifying and eligible. So it's still early in the process, and we're seeing students register every single day. So we're definitely capturing those as they come in.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So what do you think, now that was the as of 3/1/18, what do you think they are, the numbers at now?
So I almost don't want to release it because when I ran the report, it looked off. I can say that when I ran the free and reduced numbers yesterday, it was at 1306, which doesn't make sense. So I'm almost hesitant to even say that out loud because as soon as I saw it, I know, because that's what I do. So as soon as I saw it, I reached out to Jim and the other Donna Hartman and Joanne Robitaille, who all work with that data. So they did start looking at 16, 17, 18, and I said, we're gonna need to do some analysis going forward to make sure. Again, seeing what we're seeing in other areas, that number doesn't make sense. So, and we definitely have had some issues with our NutriKid software and making sure that was all captured at the start of this year. So it might just be some residual effects from that. But I will give you, at each school committee meeting, we can run that because this is a number, obviously, we're gonna watch closely because we really need that bump in state aid. On the expenditure side, I did bring this up at the last meeting, but we didn't quantify it. So right now, we have about 20 teachers who could return from their second year leave. At this point, they need to make that decision if they're coming back to district or if they're going to stay out of district where they're at. Should all of them come back, it would be an increase of $170,000. When we did go through and say, okay, we think this one might stay, knowing those circumstances, it was a little bit closer to $80,000 as a hit. But that is a contractual obligation that they have and we would have to meet. Unfortunately, their contract doesn't require them to notify us until February 1st, which again, once this timeline got pushed up, it just adds that extra layer onto us that we might not know completely in time. The other thing I want to point out, and I can bring up the list, is we did a shared document this year where all administrators in the district were allowed to go through and put in their staffing requests based on what they were seeing in their buildings or departments. As of right now, there's 35.3 FTE, 35.5 FTEs that have been requested. We have not gone through that as an executive administrative team, and we will be meeting with the principals so that they can further justify their need. And we certainly know that we do not have the capacity to bring back 35.5, but there are positions that we may have to entertain, whether it be from class size obligations or to address specific student needs or for health and safety. I don't see any areas that we could cut staffing, and because we did so much last year. And again, in some of the areas, we probably could, but we do have other needs in the district that we had last year that we couldn't address either. So that's another component that once we start meeting with the principals next week, I don't know how there's a way around some of those staffing obligations. As far as the purchase services, the out-of-district tuitions, we have 5 applications so far. They haven't been approved yet, but that's what I'm looking at as far as new applications for students going out. And then the other item that we did notice when we were going through is that some of the buildings have significant disparities between what's being spent at each building. So we are taking all of the principals' requests, but we are also looking building to building and looking at student enrollment to say this is a little out of whack for the math budget at this school compared to the math budget at that school, which is comparable student population-wise. So that's going to be another thing that we might see some level funding in subjects in certain schools in order to try and help boost up some of the spending in subjects at the other schools. So just to go over the numbers, what that would financially look like, jumping down to the state aid, we would drop that to a $1.7 million increase. I added the $170,000 into the salary side of it. Again, with the benefits, we will see an uptick on the pension side as well, a little bit. But for the most part, on the benefits, a family plan's a family plan. It doesn't really matter what their step cost is. And then the default hits the local appropriations. So that did go up to an ask of $442,000, again, as a preliminary ask. I did share this with the town as well this morning so that John and Ed both have a copy of this so they're aware. And in the email, I did outline the reasons for this adjustment.
But that doesn't include any increase in FTEs. Right. So, I mean, I think, again, we have to be clear because when we ask people to justify, and we have all the positions and the justifications, it wasn't just a wish list. These are things that they're saying that they need. And so we're going to sit down and obviously make some tough decisions, but that $400,000 is based on all those other variables, many of which we don't know. And it doesn't include any staffing that we have to come forward with.
Right, so just to go further, I did just pull it up. Some of the columns are hidden, but this is where everybody was able to go on. We did have a requesting administrator's name on there, and then the description of the need. Definitely a lot of special educations, and this is both teachers and SRP support staff. So there are definitely needs across both unions. So special educators, reading, math interventionists. We did have them do a 1, 2, or 3 as far as priority ranking, 1 being the most immediate. Expanding the teams at the middle school was a request last year based on their class sizes. That remained on there as well this year. Some of these we will probably cross off right away and say, we'll look at those in a couple years, but other ones we absolutely really need to start addressing these.
We haven't shared this with you because this is it's just a draft to us. And once we go through and make a decision of what positions we do believe, then we'll come forward with those.
Right. So then just touching again on the maintenance requirement that we have, Jason did do a little more research into the $445,000, which we originally thought was going to be only about half of the required amount. Based on the information in the surveying that he did, that looked to be adequate for what they need to do at the high school. And then the high school gym floor, I think I had it at 230,000 last time. We bumped it up to 231. So as a total increase, it would be an operational increase in our appropriations of 445,000, an increase in our capital of 536,000 for a total increase in appropriations of 981,000. We did, I know it'll be discussed later tonight, but with the capital requests that went in, we did put an asterisk on some of them because we will be coming back to you probably at the next meeting asking for impact fees and whatnot. Those will be reimbursable, so whatever funds we receive from that next year, we'll be able to offset, as a revenue for the capital request here. So that's where we stand.
Any questions for Sarah? From anybody? Still early.
It's very early. We knew this was going to be a tough year too, so.
I just want to say, and it's part of the budget, but later on, we'll be coming forward with a capital list. And the reason we're doing that is we found out basically really Tuesday that the timeline for that, they need to bring that forward to the planning board for approval prior to our next school committee meeting. So fortunately, Sarah was attending a meeting where that was discussed. So, and as we've talked about, some of the items you'll see will be the same, but we prioritized the NEASC, the needs identified in the NEASC report, so that we could, make sure that we take care of that. I know the concern about, accreditation and, we definitely want to take care of that. So, and it's an agenda item, we can discuss that. But I wanted to just point out why that's coming to you tonight. This whole process is, we have to do due diligence, but it's challenging because we don't know. I mean, look at all the variables, and we talked about healthcare. The bid on transportation, we're hoping that it's that we see some significant savings, or at least get a new fleet for the same cost. We've also talked in the past about our pharmaceutical and the potential of a 16% saving for the West Bay, and what that means to us, we're not sure. But there's all these variables, and again, we want to be as transparent, but part of that transparency is that we just don't know. And what we don't want to do is put ourselves in a position where we can't move forward, we can't operate. So, I guess that's a disclaimer about this whole process. And again, coming back, something that looks very similar to what we presented before, but it's our best knowledge right now. And the other part about the budget is I'm probably going to ask the committee to see if we can meet before the legislative hearing. I know it's now scheduled for the 4th. And so maybe it's at 7 o'clock on the 4th. And so maybe we could meet at 6 o'clock, because we'll actually need to go over. We'll have a couple more opportunities. We'll have to vote on the budget.
You agree to it?
We'll have to vote on it so that we can, because we have to submit it to the town. And I know there was some confusion last year whether or not we voted, so I want to make sure that we, we'll see where things go and how the whole process works out. Because it's not only us it impacts, it's every other department's in the same scenario and situation. But
So I have one question.
Yep.
I know it to be true, but I just want to ask it and hear the new requirement for the 1.5% of your operating budget has to show capital expenses or whatever. And I see that some came out of their operating budget, and I assume that's the most you can squeeze out, basically.
Right, well,
Or is
yes,
there an
yes, and
ability?
maybe no. We really haven't received a ton of guidance as to exactly what
means.
and how they're going to quantify that, even though that requirement is in effect now. So what I did essentially is they have a list of things that shouldn't be included. So general maintenance really shouldn't be included. Typically, if you think of capital, it's non-movable equipment. It's leasehold improvements, so non-movable improvements to a building. So I really went through and ran reports using the UCOA numbers, knowing where we stick certain expenditures in there. Trades people's salaries and benefits are allowed to be included,
yeah.
not general custodial staff. But I think the thought is if you didn't have those people on staff, you would be using a third party
paying it
and
out
paying
anyway.
money out that way. So, and this is where it's interesting, it's a maintenance requirement, but it can be capital in a capital budget. It may or may not include new debt service payments. And then you have your operations, that your maintenance in your operating budget as well. So that's where it's a little bit all over the place. We don't have any new bonds that are coming up for the school, so the debt service payment for us isn't going to count. We don't really have a dedicated capital fund yet, so that doesn't really count. So that's why I kind of pulled out as much as I could from the maintenance piece. And even in FY19, I think last month, I reported, I basically did the same formula, that I took that out, and then I think with the use of impact fees and some of these other projects that we got approved for the state, we'll hit that 1% if we complete all of those projects. So.
And it's true that it's just the school side that has that requirement. There's nothing on the town side, correct?
Correct. I don't know if there's a
'Cause it was
separate
school-
requirement,
it was
but
just
that is for
school funding, yeah.
school facilities.
Because of the bond for the funding.
Right. I mean, and in all honesty, the intent is to make sure that we're maintaining our facilities
makes
so they don't get to
100%
this
sense to me.
condition.
Yeah.
It's just hard to start from almost
scratch.
nothing. Yeah.
And just to tie into the whole facilities, I was speaking with Jason today, and one of the things that over the next, course of the next month is really mapping out like a preventative maintenance, like what should it look like for our buildings in terms of, there's consistency, there's things that need to be done in every building, but then there's also some
Routine things that
specific
have to get done,
needs that different buildings have. The high school may have that Black Rock doesn't. We need to map that out and then look at what we've been able to do, because I think this community, we need to see what we haven't been able to do. When we talk about 10 custodians being cut over X number of years.
Big.
And I think that's important because moving forward, we need to make sure that we don't, in the community, because they could say that we can say the same about the other, buildings in this community. And I think that's important to see because, no sense going in the past and saying we haven't, we know where we stand, but moving forward. And I think the other piece that's real important is when it comes to our capital improvements, that we receive that technical assistance at $150,000, because that's going to allow this community as a whole to looking forward and assess what our current facilities, how they support the educational and the needs of this community, and then what is our wish going forward? What's our vision? And I feel that's why it's important right now to look at what our capital needs are today. But moving forward, they may be different. So that's our priority now, is looking at what they are today, because we'll be starting that process fairly soon. And that'll be a great opportunity for this community to look at where do we want to invest in our current facilities and where do we need to move going forward in terms of maybe new facilities or a new way of thinking. And I know, Mr. Pierce and I were talking about this one day when we left the school committee meeting. I think we both agreed, like, the big, I'll say this is my words, but like the big nut to crack moving forward is to really put in place a long-term plan that, all of us will be proud for, not only, moving, the next couple of years, but for the future of Coventry in terms of education. So we're very fortunate. Like I said, I think we received that $150,000 and we'll, start that process. But right now, I think the priority is the budget. But I don't want to lose sight of that, because that's going to really help us. Without that $150,000, I don't know how we all know what we need to do. We just, this gives us that catalyst to do that.
Yeah. Dave?
Craig, this is an abstract question. What do you need us to do to help you reach your goal at this point?
Just not to be like, what, in terms of
What do
Goal
you,
of the budget?
yes,
Well, I think what we always need is to be strong advocates for education. I have my role as, right, working with all the leaders in this in the internal stakeholders in terms of the school department, the teacher leaders, the administrators, principals, the unions, to figure out what we need to do to provide the best product, the safest product for our schools. I need the school committee to advocate with your constituents, right? The same, to communicate, so we're all communicating that same vision, that same message.
do you need us to work with, on a subcommittee level with different people in charge of different departments to
So we,
shore them up?
we,
Well,
we,
to
we had
be
talked
there
about.
when they make
yeah.
presentation?
We had talked about that in terms of presentation moving forward. The challenge we have right now is that it's such a crunch, right? Like, we don't have our numbers in yet. And then once we get all the budgets in, then we have to go through and, and really, there's a conversation about equity, like how equal means everybody gets the same. Like, equity is really looking at what do individual districts need, different schools need, and different grade levels. And that's a much deeper dive. And that's what we're trying to move towards equity, not just equality, And so, but I think at the time we've talked about that. I know I've shared that's something I think would be helpful when we come back in some of our later presentations with the council. I think it's important, and also too, our job is to make sure that any questions you have, that we answer, and knowing, because like, never try to blindside you, right? So when you're in the community and people are asking, you have the right information. I look at that's my responsibility through everybody else. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah.
Quick, could you remind us again, because I don't have the budget calendar in front of me, what is the deadline to submit our budget to the town?
So our line item detail budget is due February 8th. I think it's the 8th, yeah. Now, in fairness, and I know John Arnett's back there, I did make it very clear that he will have a line item detail budget on that day, the same that we've had last year. Salaries and benefits will be broken down by object code, just because otherwise to do it, it will be like a 600-page budget. But all the purchase services, tuitions, all of that will be line item detailed budget by February 8th. But again, to have that done and approved to turn over to them, just as an example, those teachers may or may not be coming back by February 1st. So if I don't have all of that information in, we're gonna roll with our worst case scenario. Same with the tuitions, depending on what tuitions we have and how some of the open houses are going. I might have to make the decision then to cut the tuition revenue.
Deadline for CTE applications is mid-March, so.
There's really no deadline. I mean,
Well,
they're ongoing, but we're hoping.
There used to be a deadline.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people
Right.
come in, we get there, we're not gonna say no if somebody wants to come in
Right.
June and come the following year. So, but yeah, we're hoping that by mid-March. I think last year, that's when we had a good running count
Right.
of how many students we're gonna have.
Right, but I know we had spoken with John that, and right around, I'm drawing a blank on the day, I want to say it's around April 19th, right before the public hearing though, we did set up another date that I can get, and I said that would probably be my final version around that time, because otherwise we just won't have an accurate budget. We can do our best, but that could definitely hurt us or end up, overestimating in other areas. So it could be not beneficial to the town if we did it that way. So, but the town's very well aware of that. We've had frank and open discussions. They understand the circumstances that we're in. They certainly understand our capital requirements. We have a monthly finance meeting now with all the finance people of the town that John has started. So we had our second one earlier this week, and the school capital was brought up then again, so it is not falling on deaf ears that some of these are requirements that we just can't, we can't get around, so. Oh, yes, we also went over Christmas break, Craig, John, and I went on a tour of several of the school buildings, so John got to see, the conditions. We got to walk around and really look in, and it was nice because there weren't students there, so we could kind of go into some more areas. So I think there's a deeper level of appreciation for the challenges that we face from a facility perspective as well. It's probably one of the first times, I mean, granted, I haven't been in this position a long time, but I would be surprised if that type of tour took place, at least in several years. So it's nice to see that we have that collaboration. We just know.
We went to the the leadership conference at Bryant for elected leaders, and 3 of us went. And actually, Ann was there too from the town
Okay.
side. So, an interesting note when, Rhode Island Association of School Committees gives certificates for all of us. When you're on school committee, when you do professional development, and they, I get to wallpaper my house, At any rate, Donna went up to get our things to make it easy for us to hand them out, and she said, there was nothing for Ann. And I went, yeah, because she's not on, cities and towns don't do,
It's so, she's there.
I know, and so but what we did, I think we were inspired as a group to think about more communication and maybe take on that challenge, even as a school committee, to reach out. And so I am planning to reach out to Carrie to say that we need as a group to meet more regularly. Put it on the calendar and do it. So that because we did a case study in Mansfield, from Mansfield, Mass, and the only reason that community was able to get theirself out of budget issues was communication from both sides.
Right.
So
Working together, that
Yeah.
was the whole thing. It was like,
it's all about
instead of it being
collaboration.
two separate parties, everyone was working together for the same common goal. And I think that's what we're missing here. We need to, work with the town council and, just kind of like get in the same room and discuss it all and talk about it, That way they hear our ideas, we hear their ideas, what's wrong, what our opportunities are, what their opportunities are. So I think that was,
Yeah, that was very key, as well as the fact that it's all about trust on both sides. And that there's transparency, and that people aren't hiding their own little pots of money because they don't want the other side to see it or know about it or whatever. And I think, when Craig came on board, obviously, when he came on board, it's always been this transparent. These are the facts. This is what we do. I can honestly say I have no idea really how the town side budget works. Much to my chagrin in a lot of ways. I should know more about it than I do, because really, if you don't, even sitting through budget sessions, you don't get it. You don't. I'm glad to see that both of you are doing that. And hopefully, whatever you do bring back to both of the elected bodies, people will trust and believe. That's all we can hope for. But I'm not sure where I know that when we left on Saturday, the suggestion was made to me, see if you can reach out to the council and start doing some kind of meeting of the mind, so to speak, so there's not this feeling. Yes, exactly. More than just the legislators meeting, because not, no offense, but not a lot happens at that meeting. There's a lot of rhetoric and blowing around of ideas, but it's not really all that great for what's happening in town right here.
Right.
And so I think we probably need some meetings with the leadership of the elected bodies that are here on the local level, as opposed to the delegation from the state.
Right, we've talked, and I think I felt that would be a helpful avenue, even in just picking on facilities, if it was like a strategic workshop for the community. Not just looking at school facilities, because the town facilities
They have facilities too.
are hard too, but it's almost like you kind of need to look at all the facilities that the town owns, school town, put them together and say, okay, what is the best use for these buildings? Because right now we are kind of all scattered around in a lot of different buildings, and there might be some ways to increase efficiencies and better suit our needs if we look at it not just school buildings, but you look at the divide even that we have between these two buildings here and across the street. And again, I think that that's something that town administration is open to, but really to move any of that forward would take, you as the elected officials working with the council.
I just want to say, I have to be cautious how I say it. Like, a lot of times, there's a lot of conversation about taxpayers, right? We're all taxpayers, but I think it would always, I think we've done a good job. And I can speak for at least the administrators is working closely with the department heads and the municipal management, the former town manager working with Mr. Wazika, working with Mr. Tebow, working with Mr. Arnett. I think we've always done whatever we need to do on both sides. But if we don't have the elected officials come together,
Absolutely.
I feel it's
tough
just
thing.
challenging because, hopefully I represent, I represent the school department, which is, I represent you, I represent the majority, the vision of this school community and the community. But sometimes there's conversations that, like almost tries to divide us. And I hope that, I think we model, I'm very proud of being part of this school community. And I watch school committee meetings. I have a boring life and see and how we don't always agree. I've had disagreements with everybody. Hopefully we handle it appropriately. And I think we model that. Like sometimes classroom teachers don't agree and they model how to disagree in front of their students. I think the school committee, we've done an excellent job. You've done an excellent job. And I hope we can extend that. And because if we truly care about the taxpayers, we're going to work together because it's one community. You hear that all the time, but so I'm hoping that's very, positive. I'm very excited to hear that. And I appreciate that. And on anything that we can do to support that, we'll definitely do.
I mean, I really, it's very simple in the sense that we all, the citizens and the elected bodies, have to agree on what we want for our town. We need to sit down and do some kind of strategic plan and stay on task with it. Not have a school one, a town one, then they don't meet in any way, shape, or form. So if that's at all a possibility that we can do, I think, then people at least come on board with what the plan is and say, yeah, that does make sense. 1 year, such whatever, this has to happen. The next year, this is going to happen. We need to look out and be visionary as to, again, there's only so much pie, but whatever that pie is, the citizens have to realize, because I don't think the citizens understand the cost of things either. They don't really get it. They certainly don't. But I'm not sure our elected bodies, our officials get it either. So I'm hopeful that we can do something about that.
Excellent.
Yeah. Aside of that, I don't have any questions. Anything more about questions on the budget? Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Mr. Ahmed.
I know it's a little frustrating not having the figures and having this really shortened timeframe. But we'll get through it.
Sarah will figure it out.
I know she will.
And Mr. Arnett will figure out.
On a personal note, I'm really glad that the town financial meeting in the referendum is before June, because I'm going to Ireland. And I booked the trip before I even thought about the town financial meeting. And when I told Ian, when she was still on committee, and I said, oh, I booked a trip to June, and she went, when? I went, I hadn't even thought it.
You're
So
going to
now-
be there for graduation, right?
I'll be here, yeah. As long as graduation is in fact the date that's been asked to be. I think it's the 6th or something, I think, right now. But if we have snow days and they have to push it forward, I might not. I'm leaving on the 11th. So, anyway. So, I guess we need to, perfect timing, vote to move into executive session. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the committee recess into executive session to consider matters relating specifically to student matters, homeschool requests, Rhode Island General Law 42-46-5-A, parentheses, 8, parentheses, approval of minutes of executive sessions, 12/13/18, student matters, homeschool requests, Rhode Island General Law 42-46-5, parentheses, A, parentheses, 8, personnel matter, administrator, Rhode Island General Law 42-46-5, parentheses, A, parentheses, 4, said action being taken in open meetings, Act Sections 42-46-5, parentheses, A, parentheses, 2.
I second the motion.
And that's at 6:48. Roll call, please. Yes?
Yes.
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 Okay, we'll be back. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to reconvene the open session of the Coventry School Committee. I have 7 o'clock, and if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if you could remain standing for a moment of silence as we consider the work before us this evening. You may be seated. And I'd just like to wish everyone hope everybody had a wonderful break, holiday, and are looking forward to a happy new year and a healthy new year. That being said, Mr. Levis, if you could do the safety notification, please.
Sure, in case of an emergency, if you exit the doors behind you, you can take either a left or a right out to the exterior of the building.
Thank you. And Mr. Florio, if you could read the mission statement, please.
The Coventry Public Schools with community partnerships educate, inspire, and motivate students to be lifelong learners.
Thank you. And just for the public's knowledge, the school committee met in executive session for about 10 minutes previous to this meeting, at which point we voted on 2 items, our executive session minutes and our homeschool requests. Both of those motions and votes were unanimous, 4-0. And that being said, is there a motion to seal the minutes of the executive session?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the records of the executive session be kept closed pursuant to sections 42-46-R and 42-46-5.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on to the approval of our open meeting minutes of 12/13/18. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the minutes of the open meeting of 12/13/18 as presented/amended.
I second the motion.
Are there any questions or concerns from the committee? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on to personnel. Our reference number 2, Mr. Levis, would you like to speak to any of these?
Sure, probably after we do the first one, if
Okay,
that's okay.
sure. Is there a motion to approve the resignation of Susan Prignano?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the resignation of Susan Progiano, .6 physical therapist for the district, effective June 30th, 2019, for the purpose of retirement.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on to our classified resignation, Mr. Levis.
Sure. Josephine, do you mind standing up? Or are you standing up? I can't tell. Okay. So- Oh, come on. You know I'm only kidding. So Mrs. Baldwin is retiring after a long career, many functions in Coventry Public Schools, correct? And
How many years?
27 years. And she has a whole bunch of friends with her and family that work in the schools and coming to celebrate her. And, she's been, I've only been here 3 years, but just always a refreshing face and voice. And it's so important when people have their first experience, right? And families coming in and register. And so to have you there in the front desk has just been a gift and a blessing. And so I know from my perspective, we're definitely going to miss you. But wish you the best in retirement. And, and I just wanted to congratulate you. And it's nice to see everybody here with a smile on the face because, just seeing, that's nice. When people are retiring, you see people around them smiling. That's a good sign, especially your husband. That's a really good sign that he's smiling. So I just want to congratulate you.
Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the resignation of Josephine Bowden, 7-hour/day data clerk for the district, effective January 22nd, 2019, for the purpose of retirement.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 4-0. Again, congratulations for all your years of service. You will be sorely missed, and have fun.
Mrs. Bowden, is that a comedian sitting next to you?
Oh, you do? I bet. Well, we wish you all the best. Moving on to certified leaves of absence. Is there any comment from the superintendent? Or is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve a leave without pay for Ashley Papa, 1.0 inclusion teacher at Coventry High School from January 23rd, 2019 to January 29th, 2019.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on to classified appointment. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to affirm the recommendation of the superintendent to appoint Matthew Jester, 6.5-hour day teacher assistant intensive support score at Hopkins Hill Elementary School, retroactive to January 1st, 2019.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 4-0. So I'm going to move into the public agenda, at which point people can speak to any of the agenda items. If there is a motion made before we take the vote, the public is allowed to give their opinion about something before that vote is actually called. And I'm going to make a little exception because I would really love Josephine to be able to say anything if she really wanted to, or if the public gathered here wanted to speak about this before not having to sit through the whole meeting till the public comment part. So is there anybody who wants to speak or say anything? Okay. Yes, and identify yourself too. Yes.
First of all, Josephine, on behalf of the SRP, I would like to thank you for your many years of dedication and service to Coventry Public Schools. I know that you've worn many hats in the district, and you've done a very good job at every hat you've worn. But I just wanted to say thank you and wish you the very best.
All right. Did you want to say anything?
I'm going to say something if I can.
All right, sure.
I have a PowerPoint
Oh,
presentation.
my God.
I know. As soon as I
Is there a
heard that,
time
I'm like,
limit on this? So I am at the moment Josephine's supervisor at central office. And so a lot of the things that come up, I handle. And just to kind of give an example of what kind of employee Josephine is, even in her last weeks of school, even when she had already notified everyone that she was going to retire, 2 Fridays ago, we had a student new to the district, a family, and we're trying to register the kids. And it's kind of a complicated situation. One's going to go to one school, one's going to go to another. We were on and off the phone with the parent probably 3 times that day trying to get it all squared away. Mom was very anxious. And we did not have it all buttoned up by the end of Josephine's workday. And Josephine was in the office by herself, and she had been there since 7:30 in the morning. And she and I were the only ones left trying to sort this out for this parent so that it wouldn't carry over to the next week. And she stayed until, I think, 4:30, an hour past her time, and she helped me sort it out. We went back and forth. And then when it was time to call the parent with the final, response to how we were going to handle it, she said, "I'll take care of it. I'll do it." And I said, "Yes, that's great," because I knew Josephine has her way of making people feel comfortable and relaxed. And she didn't think anything of it. And, and she was off and she had her weekend. So she's the kind of person that even when she's at the very end And she could have left it to me. She could have just said, "This is for you. I'm out of here." She didn't. So thank you, Josephine, for that kind of dedication to our district.
I think it's interesting that you're here, because oftentimes people who resign for retirement don't come to school committee meetings, and that's why I just wanted to hear from the folks that are supporting you and came to actually hear us say that and have it official. So, again, obviously you have made an impression. Did you want to say anything?
I just want to say thank you to everybody for all the support and friendships I met along the way, and I'm truly going to miss Coventry Public Schools. But I'll be in to visit.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Great.
There we go.
All right, thank you. All right. So moving on to number 7, and also please feel free, the whole gang that's with Josephine, if you want to leave, you can. We'll be fine. We won't feel badly. But you should stay for the celebration for our next celebration for Alexandria, and then you can go. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Levis.
So this is something that's been on our agenda. This is probably the 4th time, but it's happening tonight. So Alexandria, do you mind coming up front? So this is actually Alexandria was married, used to be Hornstein, now it's Alexandria McKay, correct?
Yes.
Though your email still is Alexandria Hornstein.
I haven't
so-
changed it yet. Don't
Yes,
don't
that's
tell
okay.
me.
So Alexandria, I actually attended, was probably a month and a half ago. There was a celebration by the Rhode Island Art Educators Association, and they were celebrating many artists and many of the art teachers. And Alexandria was chosen out of hundreds and hundreds of art teachers throughout Rhode Island as the new art educator of the year. And so I was fortunate enough to go to, it was a great night, just an overflow crowd in the, was it the Sun, I forgot the name of the Rising Sun Mill
Mills,
over in
yeah.
near Olneyville over there. And Alexandria did a great presentation. If you notice, we sent out some cards this year. And Alexandria was able to get 2 young artists and
do those cards.
Mrs. McDonald worked with Crystal Violet and made those incredible cards, and those are your artists. So I just wanted to bring you, and we're so proud of you.
Thank you.
And if you want to share any of the work that you've been doing or talk a little bit about to the committee and to those here, but it's a great honor. Like I said, we've had a lot of individuals from Coventry recognize a lot of our educators, and you're just another one in a line of many, many exceptional educators. So I just wanted.
That's what I'll say. I'll say I work with amazing art colleagues and people in Coventry, and that inspire me every day. And my students, especially, they inspire me every day. And that's why I feel I've grown so much. And I said that in my speech. My kids help me be the teacher I need to be every day, and that's the best part of being a teacher. So thanks, everyone. Really nervous. I was not prepared.
That's okay.
I was
Doing
nervous the
great.
first time I had to give this speech.
No,
So.
no. Well, I think and you just exemplified, because there's no secret that we had a tough time last year, and we probably have a few tough years ahead. But we know that that the arts and creativity and all those other programs that we provide that help students do better in academics, and you're like I said, it's what you do is as important as all the other opportunities those students have. And like I said, and it was nice to have you recognized. So again, just want to congratulate you.
Thank
And
you
I
so
don't know if the
much.
committee wants to say.
I just want to say thank you and congratulations, and we're so glad to see someone excited in their job and really feeling fulfilled. So that's great. Congratulations. I'm
Thank
so
you.
glad that they honored you
Yeah, it
and
was
that
a
we
huge
have you in
honor.
our district.
Couldn't believe it. Honored and humbled. Thank
That's
you so
so
much.
great. That's so great. Anybody else?
Congratulations.
Thank
It's
you.
a
Congratulations.
wonderful effort.
Anybody from the public want to say anything? Hip hip hooray. Thank you so much. All right. All right. I don't see Laurie. Is Laurie here?
Yes, she's there.
Oh, am I blind? I guess I saw that, and so, yeah. Anyway, so our next agenda item is the report out of the CTE subcommittee. And we did have a PowerPoint in our
Right,
packet.
right. So
I get thrown off with the special ed.
I know both
earlier than Ada.
Dr.
Bye,
Dixon and Ms. Patno and Mr. Florio, you guys sat in, were part of the CTE subcommittee. And so the last meeting that you had, the outcome was going to be that Mrs. Ferguson was going to do a report. So she's here tonight to present that report out around the
Okay.
subcommittee.
Subcommittee report. Yep. It says, hi, Brad. I don't think it's Brad. Hello, Brad. Yeah, we're looking for a handout, so we're good. Before you start, I just wanted to say I was at community night last night, and I loved your presentation. It was great, and I hope a lot of. Oh, you did? To what? To the Coventry schools, or to my? Yeah, I don't read that one. I only look at.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, I'll go back and look.
So we did have, we convened a subcommittee this August, as Superintendent Levis said. We wanted to have a fresh set of eyes, kind of look at the Career Center data, just kind of talk about some things, you know, what I might see as a focus for us to look at. And we met 5 times. You can go, yeah. We met for, we had 5 meetings, Mr. Florio, Mrs. Patno, and Mrs. Dixon. And at the beginning, we really just talked about the strengths and the weaknesses. We actually did a SWOT analysis, and through that, we identified 4 kind of very frequent trends in the data. So we did convene, we did collect a lot of data looking at enrollment, looking at budget. We looked at full-time teacher equivalents, and we really went through everything over the about 3 meetings before we really identified that recruitment, well, of course, is definitely something that we are hyper-focused about, because in order to have programs, we have to have students in our programs. And so we also want out-of-district students because, of course, we get tuition. But how many students can we really recruit? And so that was a big question, like how many open seats are there for the recruitment? Yeah. And then the other thing we looked at was the retention. How many students end up in the program who start at the end of the program? So how many kids are really staying for the sequence of courses? And then what are some of the obstacles either that students face or that we as a team face in recruiting and retaining students? And then we also looked at branding, or kind of marketing. How are we branded? How do people know us? Do we really have an identity? And, you know, being a center within a high school has its strengths and its weaknesses. One of the strengths is that we are in the high school, and students don't have to leave, go off campus, and go somewhere else to get their career and tech programs. So they feel more a part of the high school, and they don't have this divisive feeling within the school. But the drawback to that is we don't really have an identity of being a career center because we aren't separate. And so, does that affect us, or how does that affect us? I think we talked a lot about how the branding is, and knowing that we are one of 10 centers is really important. It's important to us in the way we are looked at by the state. It is important because now high schools are able to offer CTE programs, and we are more than just a comprehensive high school. We are a career center that employs industry teachers, not just teachers who are teaching a career program. And that's really important. It's important in program approval. It's important in the way our students get information from their teachers, and it's important in the way they receive their training. So I think that was one of the things that kind of stood out, is how do we keep our identity as a center, but yet still be embedded within the high school. So those are 4 things that we talked about. The next couple of slides will show the growth in our career center over a 6-year period. It will also show program enrollment versus seat capacity, because of course when we looked at recruiting and all of this focus on recruiting, we really can't take in more students than we have seats for. So that was something that you'll see some data on. In addition to more than doubling our enrollment, so we went from, in 6 years, 400 or so students to 965. We've also doubled our program offerings from 6 years ago to now 15. 13 of those 15 programs have full ride approval. So this shows the enrollment data over time. Blue is our Coventry students. The purple is our out-of-district students. Blue is in-district, purple is out-of-district, and the red is just the total. So as you can see, we started at 411 students in 13-14 school year. We also were not available in the 9th grade, so that's another thing why we would have some low enrollment. And then as we moved to 16, you can see we had a little drop off. We opened our programs to 9th graders around the 16 school year. We started to open up admission to 9th graders. And then we started to climb from there. So I think from 16 to 19, we've had a big, really big enrollment push. But you could see that, if you go back 1 second, you can see that the out-of-district students really haven't,
Stayed the same.
yeah, they haven't moved a lot. So, 6 years ago, we had 43, and now we have 57. So not much growth in the out-of-district. Okay. Then I broke it down further by enrollment per program versus the seat capacity. So the blue is the enrollment, red is capacity. You can see that most programs are very close to capacity. There are only a couple that have some gaps, and ROTC is one, and we know that that has been a struggle over time, and with the changes in the Navy, to the Navy ROTC, it still is low enrollment. The thing there is we do have to reach 100, and so of course that's the cap. The cap is 100. And through this, I think what we saw was that our enrollment is very close to capacity. So how many kids, when we go out and we recruit and we are, doing a lot of advertising for new enrollment, there really isn't a lot of room to take kids in. Because what happens is when you get a large freshman class or a large level 1 class, we really cannot sustain that to the senior year because of the way the programs are structured, where they end up with a double block in the senior year. Because now you would need more teachers, because the teachers are now in a double block. And so they can only take so many students. So that becomes a really big obstacle. Okay, Don.
Could you refresh my memory on that first one, ADVAN? What's that stand for?
Oh, that's the welding, advanced welding. I didn't
I was trying to
realize they
figure
were
out which one was
gonna come out like
missing,
that.
and I was like,
That's advanced
I should have
welding,
known. Okay.
automotive, carpentry, computer IT, cosmetology, criminal justice, culinary arts, child studies, graphics, health careers, ROTC, biomedical, engineering, business, and sports, which are this year's new programs.
Lori,
That's
you're-
why they have-
are all those students enrolled in the, does that include students that are taking a course versus students that are fully enrolled? These are
These are only
students
for
enrolled in the
students
pathway or
enrolled.
career, okay.
Right. So then the next few slides will look at retention, and really just to give you a visual of level 1 enrollment compared to level 3 enrollment. So here, you can see that in the first year of the program, we are almost at capacity in every program. So we really fill up our programs. Our freshmen come in, they're excited, they really understand, or they get excited about the concept of having this training over time, and that they can take these exciting things that are interesting and that they're passionate about. So we have no problem enrolling in the first level. We do have a problem, of course, with the out of district, but not for our own students. Go ahead, next. Level 2, you can see it starts to drop. 1, because we are now in a double block. Most level 2 kids are in a double block, which means we can't offer 2 sections of that class. We can only offer 1 because the teacher is now teaching 2 blocks of that. The reason many of the programs have 2 blocks, and not all of them do, is because of the training program and because of the hours, the requirements in the curriculum. And so they are necessary in the blocks, necessary with the double blocks. It's because of internships and just the way that's structured. Okay, next. Level 3, and we do have level 4 in some of the programs, but I didn't show all of the level 4 because there wasn't enough data to even show it as significant, because there aren't enough of the programs that might have a level 4. Advertising did not run a level 3 class this past year, and that's why you don't see anything. The numbers were low. We ended up adding a freshman class here. We took away the level 3 class because there really weren't enough kids to go into it. And so we kind of restructured the way her program her classes go. We don't have double blocks in the first 3 levels now. So I think that may help. Automotive, they are pretty close to capacity. Carpentry, a little lower. The computer IT, I have computer, the first one is IT, the second one is, first one is computer AP, the second one is the Cisco program that ended up getting restructured this year. So the computer program also went through a revision in its offerings. And cosmetology also drops off. Criminal justice has remained. Culinary arts also drops off. Health careers just a little. In health, education just a little bit. And the health careers has maintained their students this year because we offered the EMT class. So we had many kids who did want to drop that, but when we had the EMT offering, because now they had a good certification that would keep them in there, we kept almost all of them. And then the ROTC drops off significantly. So there is definitely, there is definitely a drop off in that 3rd level. Okay, Don. So that was the data. Now, what we talked about at the conclusion of this was that for recruitment, yes, while we do need to fill the level 1 classes, because of course you need the fresh, you need to continue to fill your classes, we need to put a cap, I think, on the level 1. Right now, we offer a couple of sections, but when those students move to the next level, there are too many students now. So we cannot sustain the class as it moves up. And I think what happens is it makes it easier for students to leave because they know there's this large class moving up now. You know, I think there are a few reasons why that mindset starts to kick in that they're gonna drop. But I think if we put a cap on the level 1 enrollment in order to keep the numbers low enough not to need new teachers, we are gonna see a lower enrollment overall. But we'll have to see how that plays out. So that was one of the things we talked about. And then the freshman class always draws the highest enrollment, of course, because it's exciting and new to them. The retention, I think we need to look at, we talked a lot about offering new certificates for the seniors. What is the best option for them? Either if there isn't a good option, then they don't belong there. It should be over in level 3, and they should, move out into other classes. But if it's important for us to keep them for whatever reason, either maybe they have to take their certification test in the senior year and they can't do it in the junior year, then we still have to look at how to make that last year important enough that we don't lose them. So look at new certificates, maybe internship opportunities. I think we talked a lot about this since we've added the freshman class. Now we need to get them out there in that senior year, and that's what we've started to do in many of the programs. I think that will at least, it makes sense because now they're going out and practicing their skills and being in an internship. So looking at dual enrollment at CCRI or Rhode Island College for them. And then, of course, reviewing the necessity of the last sequence and making sure that it's necessary. So don't just have the last sequence because we want to have it. Make sure it's necessary. So really digging deeper into that last level, making sure that it's important, and making and even doing a survey for juniors and seniors and even alumni. And then the obstacles really were around the credit requirements. It blocks kids, so they start off, they come in, they're a freshman, they come in, they take a semester class, the next year they take a full year class, but now they want to take some other things. They want to take physics or they want to take some AP classes, but they're in a double block. And so it kind of, it prevents them from taking other classes. And I think one of the biggest ones is the world language requirement, having that 2-year world language requirement. Well, not just me, but that was kind of what the team thought. Only because it's not a state requirement, so why do we have the 2-year language requirement? I think the team wanted to explore that a little bit further. And then look at embedding credits a little bit more. We do have some art and tech credits embedded in other classes, and just look at possibly having more of that in order to open up the schedule so that students can not only take the Career Center offerings, but they can take other electives, because there's still music and other important electives too that they can take. So, and looking at the credit requirement, that was also a big thing, that we have a 24 credit requirement, but the state requires 20 credits. So why do we have a 24 credit requirement? So looking at those things. So are the credits necessary? So should we convene a committee to review that? That was one of our questions. The next thing was around branding and how can we keep our identity, but still be competitive in the state? How, what can we do? Can we put up, a sign? We don't have any sign that distinguishes the Career Center. We, one of the suggestions I think, Dave, you might have made was Coventry High School, home of the Regional Career and Technical Center. That includes both of the schools. And just promoting the Career Center within the school so that you know it's there and that kids kind of embrace it as a whole, that yes, it is a center. Don? Our marketing plan that we've implemented to date includes 2 shadow days that the 8th graders had. They came up to the high school in December. They were 2 great days. They were fun. I think the kids had a good time looking at the programs. However, I did get some feedback from faculty that they wish the kids could have shadowed the whole school. And so why did we really just shadow the Career Center, and why didn't they shadow, academic classes and other electives? So that was really good feedback. I think that it's something we should look at. Maybe they come up for a whole day and, we figure out something like that, and they're able to take some really look at some of our whole school offerings. We've done a lot of advertising in newspapers. We've purchased a mailing list and sent out 10,000 mailers to students within surrounding districts, homes that had children ages 11 to 16. So kind of getting that name out there, getting the word that we're out there, and seeing if we could get some response from out-of-district families. We also sent mailers to our surrounding 8th grade schools. These were schools that gave us their 8th grade labels. We had a career fair for 8th graders at the middle school. That was exciting. And we did do a presentation at East Greenwich High School. They were the only school that allowed us to come in. We did 2 days at the Rhode Island Convention Center for the Junior Achievement Career Fair, and while it was mostly students from Providence and Cranston, Smithfield, they really were from everywhere. Pontiac was there. Students came in. There were about 4,000 middle school students who came over 2 days. And our students set up as vendors, and they spoke to kids, and they told them about their program, and they handed out literature, and so it was really a good marketing tool for us, and our kids really enjoyed it. They talked about their programs, they tried to sell it, and it was nice. I did get some feedback from some students from other districts, but they don't have transportation, so that made it difficult. And then we went to the CS4RI Fair. We had the Chamber of Commerce in for our annual luncheon, and of course we have been really doing some great community agency services. What we have left to do this year, continue with our newspaper advertisements, continue to offer shadow days, tours, general info to parents, send out additional mailers for programs that do have some openings, and then do something for our Skills Week this year in February. We still have the private schools to attend, and we are doing the home show at the convention center, so that's always a big publicity for us. And we also have the career fair at Sunedia Defense, and we have scheduled 6th and 7th grade tours on early release days, and then just continue our outreach with businesses in the community. So takeaways, of course, recruitment is still very important. However, we do need to be mindful that the increased enrollment may result in a need for increase in teachers and space. In order to compete with high school programs around the state, we do need to keep our identity as a career center and keep our programs up to date with industry and labor market trends. We need, the growth of programs and enrollment really can only be sustained or expanded with support both financially and with staff. And we need to continue to be visible, keep our name in the public. And I think one of the most important things that we talked about was this is really a K-12 effort. So maybe having a subcommittee consisting of district staff and really looking deeper into some of these topics and having a nice long-range plan for the center.
Okay.
That was a lot longer than I thought it was gonna be.
Good job.
Any questions?
I'm good.
Jim,
Any
you wanna
questions?
start?
Oh,
Come on.
I'm at the end here, so.
I don't have any questions.
I don't have
'cause
any
I
questions.
sat on the
Go ahead,
committee.
James.
So you're on, James.
I want more data. Actually, I do. So looking at the retention slide, which I like, by the way, it's a good snapshot of enrollment versus capacity for those
Yeah.
3 levels.
Yeah.
I'm actually very interested in retention rate though, and it doesn't quite give me that. So if you can at some point get to Craig the actual retention rate year over year for these programs, that'd be great. You know,
The
percentage
actual
by class.
percentages,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah,
Yep,
yeah. Because it's hard to look at these slides
Right.
because
To find out.
right.
you're in an increasing enrollment situation right now, and then I did a couple calculations here, and it's not just because you added new programs, you actually have more students per class in the programs, which is great. You know, it's a nice problem to have.
It is, thank you.
So just a little more curious around the retention rates. Otherwise, good observations. I think some of the conclusions you found are eye-opening, especially, you know, seeing how the students are reacting to the carrot at the end of the stick. You know, if there is a certificate, an extra certificate, or some kind of goal
Right,
that they see value in, they're more incentivized to
Right.
continue on with the program, and I think that's a very keen insight and not to be overlooked. But otherwise, overall, I think the entire committee, great job.
thank
Yeah.
you, thank you. And it was.
was eye-opening.
It really was nice to meet with Dave and Kathy and Ian, because we don't have an opportunity to talk like that, you know, to really sit and discuss and look at that. And it was very good for me to hear their feedback and to hear and to see their focus, their lens on what I see every day. And so it really was objective for me, and it really caused me to think and reflect. So it was very, very helpful. Thank you.
Great, thank you. It was helpful for us too.
And Rick Schwartz.
Rick Schwartz.
He was helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Webb.
Yeah, marketing guy.
For me, takeaways are a couple things. Is that I think having too many kids and needing more teachers in space, that's a good problem to have. You know, the second part is that looking at the culture. When I first came to Coventry, people talk about, and I still hear a lot about blue collar as if it's a bad thing, right? And it's not. It's a good thing. I think we have to operationally define what that even means. But what I see happening, at least in this year, is the shadow days that took place. I know in the middle school, when those kids went back, they were buzzing for a few days talking about it. Kathy Tankrell is going to be taking 5th graders up. So I think we've got to change that culture to get students talking about and thinking about career, and that these students are still on a track to go to college if they so choose. Because I feel like that's a cultural thing around here, and we need to change that. And the only way to change that is through the students. And the point of bringing up the students buzzing is because if those students are buzzing, they're going to go home and talk about it, and their parents are going to be buzzing. But if we just reach out to the adults constantly, and I feel that's so crucial. And like the 6th graders are going to be coming up. I know Mr. D'Amico met with Mr. Lucian and the Alumni Association wants to use some funds to help establish that whole career concept and exploration. So I think we really need to make that part of what we do. And then really to look at that third year piece and figure out, and there's a lot of internal conversations I think that need to take place at the high school around this, but also, figure out and what we can do. And again, I know part of that, what you guys started is assessing those programs. And I'll say, and not to defend the ROTC, but I know that always comes up under a microscope, but we also have, in the past, we've had several students in that program that had been tuitioned in. And so even though a small number, when you look at, it almost covers the expense. And so I want to be clear about that. And again, whatever decisions are made down the road, they're made, but it's, we want to look at each program. And I know tomorrow we have a meeting at 9:00 with Mr. Smith. I know Bill Smith looking at the music, because it was paperwork that was done before, I don't understand, but looking at a music pathway. And he wants to talk about the radio station. We've reached out to the FTC to see about things we can do. And, so trying to be innovative and look at the assets that we do have. So I think it's like the cycle that Don had presented, that constant cycle of inquiry. We've got to apply that same process here, so.
So, Mr. Levis, just to circle back to where you were talking about, that whole stigma of blue collar and everything. I think that goes way back to, when this was known as Coventry Vo-Tech, and you didn't go to college if you went there, it was, so I think that you need to, that needs to be put out there, is that, this isn't,
Right.
You can still go to college if you attend the career in tech. This is to start you in a career. However, there's welding, automotive, those things that can get you right into your career.
Right.
So,
That's so true, Donna. We had a panel last night, we had an alumni panel present to parents, last night, when I had a graduate, 2015 graduate of the auto program, I had a 2015 graduate of the Cosmo program, 2017 welder, 2018 carpenter, and then 2017 health careers and 2018 health careers. And I was so proud of their insights about how, many of them are in college now, and how their experience in the Career Center prepared them not just for going out to work, but giving them a different mindset about what that meant, what going to college meant, how they could integrate what they had learned to help them not have debt. And they were really smart about their insights. So they got it. They got that. I could go to automotive because I loved it, but I'm going to apply what I did there to mechanical engineering because that's really where I want to be. And it's a great thing. And yet there's another student who's in the welding program who isn't ready for college right now, but he knows he's at Electric Boat, and he knows they will pay for him to go to college.
oh, yeah.
So again, another smart decision, and these are kids who are, 18, 19, 21 years old, so.
It just gives them more options for their career.
Right, exactly.
Mr. Levis, what impressed me, I happened to be at the high school for something, and I forgot why I was there, but I saw Bill Smith, and he was meeting with an alumnus who was a sports commentator for ESPN, who used to announce the basketball games.
Mr. Bestwick. Yeah.
That's right. And he used to announce the basketball games. And if you get a broadcasting component, there are students that are interested in the broadcasting component. There's students interested in weather, the prediction of weather, meteorology.
Meteorology, yeah.
It's the kids at the high school are extremely excited about this. I mean, really.
It gives them choices. It's not just,
And I think, what I do think, and I very much enjoyed the presentation last night, but again, the interesting thing, when I first walked in and I sat up there was a neighbor of mine who's not in my neighborhood anymore, but she's got a son coming to the high school, and she said something about, well, we're here to look at, the career in tech. And she said, but I want him to go to college. And so I said, yeah, but he can do both, you know? So that's, again, what Donna brought up, that there still is that mentality out there. And so I think everyone has to come on board with that. Teachers who are not in the career and technical programs need to be talking about this with students as well. And I think it is another option, and you're right. It can be a reasonable as far as money goes, because college isn't getting any cheaper. It is the biggest. I think it's surpassed mortgage debt
Yes.
in the country, and it's in the billions. So we need to look at ways to educate our kids, give them skills that they can use, and still be able to get out of school or get a good job, and still be able to buy a house and start a family, and not still having to live with their parents trying to pay off their debt. So I really thank you for the work you did, and this presentation was great, and I enjoyed working on the committee, and I hope there are some things. My biggest concern is putting, as a school committee member, I've heard over and over, well, I couldn't take that because of scheduling or whatever. I do know that recently I haven't heard that as much anymore, because I think people really are bending over backwards to try to fit schedules and make things work for kids. But I really think that some of our credits need to be embedded. I mean, we need to do more of that, that you can take this and it counts for this and this and whatever. But, you know, I'm certainly a proponent of doing the best we can with a beautiful facility and reaching as many kids as possible. So, any other comments from the committee? Anything from the public before we move on? All right, you're all set? Anything to say? So I guess our next agenda item is 9, the school committee meeting calendar, 2019, which was our reference 4, and there's also our district calendar that we have to, but that's second.
Right.
So the first one is the school committee calendar. And were there any questions from anyone, or, yeah? Mr. Pearson?
Yeah, I'd like to propose we move the first meeting in February to February 7th.
The first meeting in February. Oh, it's Valentine's
And that would
Day.
accomplish possibly a couple things now, based on the budget workshop we had. It would give us a few more days if we had to meet to approve a budget before it needs to be submitted to the town council. Gives our administrators a few more days.
Could you run that by me again? Because of course I just vegged it out of my head. So the 14th, you want to propose to where?
7th. What's the 14th?
So I just telling you that now.
It's we have had school
14th.
committees on Valentine's Day, but it's not very nice.
I won't be here if we have one. So.
Oh, you won't? I think it's
actually will not be here either the 7th or the 14th.
on either of them. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll
My wife
have,
is watching too.
so the two of you will be gone, and I don't think our new member will be on board by then.
No, March,
So,
The 4th, though, hopefully, the 4th will.
The 4th is the legislators meeting.
So if we do
It
the budget
is.
before the meeting,
Right, well, I
I'm
still.
just saying, you won't be there.
The other option is moving February 14th to the 21st. I'd rather move it up a week. Because we don't have a meeting the week before that, so we're still skipping a couple of weeks. So
So do you want the 7th or the 21st?
I'm proposing the 7th,
can,
unless it causes a big issue.
this is definitely something we can do by email, correct?
What?
Scheduling meetings?
Rescheduling
That's
a
not a
meeting?
violation, yeah. We can-
So, the only reason I'm saying is I don't know if there's a permutation out there that we haven't thought of. So it really
point.
is something that you need to email the superintendent and say, I won't be here in February, these dates. Same thing for you, Donna, because we will be in a question of not having a forum.
Yeah.
A quorum.
Quorum.
A quorum,
I'm
to be able,
actually going
if
on a
in
cruise.
fact, we had to vote on something.
Right.
We can meet, but we won't be able to vote on anything, which would be fine as long as you guys are okay, but they may need something that we need to vote on. So if you could look at that.
Well, I'll
and-
need to know from the committee
Exactly.
members when they're not, because we still need to vote. We have to vote on a budget that we send forward.
Exactly.
We can't just send them forward and,
Exactly, so,
right, we have to vote on that prior, so that the next
Mm-hmm.
meeting we have is the 24th. We'll have a budget workshop before that. But I was going to recommend that we do before the legislative meeting.
Oh, I see
Because
what
that's
you're
at
saying.
7 o'clock, so if we
Yes.
met at
We're
6
all
o'clock,
planning on
but I
that.
don't know if people are going to be here. So,
I could be there.
will be
You'll be here
Okay,
on the
then-
4th, right? We'll all be here on the 4th?
6th.
Are you here
So
on the
then I won't be
4th,
back till the
James?
15th, so.
Sorry, Sarah. Try to give you a few more days. I don't know.
The 7th, James will be here.
oh, we won't
But are
be
you
here
gonna
the
be here?
7th.
I won't be here.
But, oh, so we'll have 3 on the
Oh, okay.
7th.
All right, I didn't understand that then. Okay.
I didn't know. I thought you were both off.
If Donna's okay with that, then.
Yeah,
Are you okay with
Okay.
that? So we could do it the 7th. I'm okay
Okay.
with the 7th, I think. Let me just look.
All right, just
Hold on. Before I say.
be hot off the press.
I'm good with the 7th as well. So your proposal on the
choice.
14th is the
Show
7th,
up.
right?
Yes.
And the 28th is fine?
Oh, everything else is fine.
Everything else is fine? Okay, so I guess we can move forward with that if you're okay with that, Donna. Yeah?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
You need a motion?
So we need a
keep forgetting
motion,
there's only
yes.
four
Madam
of
Chair, I
us.
make a motion that we change our meeting from February 14th, 2019 to February 7th, 2019.
Okay.
I second the motion.
Any further discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 4-0.
Mag, thank you. My wife appreciates that too, Mr. Levis. As well as
I didn't even-
James's wife appreciates that.
I didn't even notice. I guess it tells you something about my love life. I would have noticed it as it got closer, but I didn't notice it when I looked at
You
it.
see all the chocolate in the stores and those
Yeah,
heart-shaped things.
it kind of gets you.
Kind of
yeah.
giveaway.
Yeah, yeah. Um, 4-0. Okay, so moving on to 10, which is the school calendar.
Right.
Any questions about that? Mr. Levis, did you want to talk
I
about?
think it's
know
there was
pretty-
an error made,
Yeah.
and there was an email to support this, but Ms. Maycumber had let us know that the date on the calendar was not the actual date, so we just wanted to
Make sure. that
correct
was
it and get it approved by the committee.
right. Okay. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the revised 2018-2019 school calendar as presented / amended.
I second the motion.
Any questions from the committee? Anything from the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on to 11, the special education program overview. So I guess I can turn that over to
Brad
Brad and company
and Fred
and Denise,
and Denise.
the gang. The gang of 3.
Here we go.
Amy and Kathy.
Yes. And Kathy's
Dynamic
coming.
trio.
Anybody
There's
a
you
whole
didn't
crew.
bring?
Half the audience.
What's the time limit on this?
This will go quick. Days.
3 days.
It's gonna be special ed in a nutshell. So first off, I'd like to thank the Madam Chair and the school committee, Superintendent Levis, for inviting me here tonight to speak. I also need to thank Denise and Fred and Amy and Kathy for joining me. Tonight's presentation is in response to the update that you requested on the changes that we presented last spring. That is the move of our pre-K rooms to Washington Oak, the move of our life skill programs at Tioga, and the new program at Western. And since we figured that we're going to be here tonight, we just kind of wanted to give a quick snapshot. All right. A quick snapshot of special education, what it is, and special education in Coventry. So first off, special education is it's not a different curriculum. It's not a special classroom. It's not different expectations. It's not giving special privileges or giving a child extra help or slowing the pace of instruction down for a child. It's not a way to get SAT combinations. It's definitely not something to be ashamed of, and it's not meant to be permanent. So what special education is, it is access to the regular ed curriculum. It is in the least restrictive environment. It's same expectations. It's specialized instruction and related services. It's individualized adaptations to the content, methodology, and delivery. It's accommodations and modifications to level the playing field, and it's a focus on remediation and exiting from services. So there's a whole lot in what it is. So I'm going to try to break that down for you.
I love that slide. I really did when I read it. And reading it again. Yeah.
No, not yet. Don't go.
I'm sorry, what? Whoops.
We need Don to do this.
I know, where's the expert? Yeah. So,
Oh, gosh.
so what you need to know is our goal, which really is framed by laws and regulations, and that's a big piece. It's framed by laws and regulations. Our goal is to make sure that we're offering students with IEPs specialized instruction in their area of need and just that area in the least restrictive environment, or that environment which closely resembles a typical classroom, while making sure they can access the curriculum by offering accommodations and modifications only when necessary. And if we do this well, in many cases, our hopes are our students will no longer need services for their entire K through 12 career. At the end of this, all students are expected to be college or career ready, able to be gainfully employed in an area of interest, and as independent as possible by the time they leave Coventry schools. Sometimes when we talk about special education, there can be some confusion regarding IEPs and 504s. So just to give you a little bit of background, in 1973, the Section 504 of the Rehab Act was signed into law as a first civil rights protection for all people with disabilities. This started out in the workplace and made its way into the school system. So even today, an adult with a disability is eligible for a 504 plan in the workplace, but they cannot have an IEP in the workplace. When we compare the two, we see that an IEP is a disability plus an educational impact, and then that need for specialized instruction and related services. Whereas a 504 plan is a disability, substantial impact on the area of daily functioning, and then just the need for accommodations. So again, that big difference is that specialized instruction coming from the special educator. That's what sets those two apart. Why I put this up there and how it affects our department is you can see in the black right below it, the data and evaluation-based decisions. So, it's often our people who are able to collect that data, interpret that data, and perform those evaluations. So again, when we go through the numbers, you're going to see, numbers of different students on 504s and IEPs. Just know there's a whole group of students we haven't really captured the number who may not have qualified or weren't eligible for a 504 plan. So when we break down, the big question here is going to be, how many children do we service? So we have 743 students with IEPs, 268 students with a 504 plan, which is roughly 1/5 of our population here in Coventry. It's important to know that among these children are our star athletes, our talented musicians, our creative artists, our honor roll students, our talented craftsmen, actors, actresses, and future leaders. These students that we service join the ranks of the students who came before them. I did this, I just Googled famous people who had an IEP or famous people with a disability. You get a master list of people in society: Michael Phelps, Steven Spielberg, Charles Schwab, Jay Leno, Anderson Cooper, Richard Branson, Tommy Hilfiger, Stevie Wonder, Stephen Hawkins, just to name a few. I'm not expecting anybody to raise their hands, but I'm sure there are a number of us here tonight who have benefited from either special education or a 504 plan. And if I did ask you to raise your hand and you actually didn't raise it because that wasn't you, I bet you could name a loved one that was either benefited from a IP or a 504 plan. So again, in this town, it's 1/5 of the population. When we look at the numbers, so you can see up there 29% female, 71% male, 13% of all students. When we look at Rhode Island, minus the urban core, Charahoe 11%, Cumberland 15%, East Greenwich 12%, North Kingston 12%, with that average being that 14%. With us at 13, we're right there. We're right in the middle of that. We have 68 504 plans, 39% female, 61% male. I know Fred's done a lot of work between the male and female looking at, and that seems to be a trend throughout the district. There's 14 disability categories that you can be eligible for special education services in. We put the top 4. So the learning disability, just to give you an idea, there's 79 females, 151 males. Other health impaired, there's 26 females, 81 males. Speech and language, 27 females, 90 males. Autism, 18 females and 73 males. Again, something you should be aware of is if going back a decade, autism would not have been on that top 4 list. It would probably would have been on the bottom 4 list.
So can I just ask one question? Does the differences with the female and the male, does that speak to what we saw on the testing? And is that does it correlate at all, or is it completely different?
It's a multifaceted answer.
Yeah.
One part is that it's a national trend. There are about 3 times as many males with diagnosed disabilities than females. But at the same time, it also aligns with all the other district data that we look at, where we do see also significant performance discrepancy between males and females. So I don't want to speak for the whole department, I can just speak for myself, I want to take responsibility or be part of at least trying to narrow those gaps to the extent possible.
Okay.
It doesn't mean, because that's a national trend, that we need to accept that at face value.
Okay. Interesting.
So when we break down the IEPs down by grade, this is what you get. You can just look at that for yourself. In order to service those children, we roughly have about 12 nurses between one-on-one nurses and nurses at each school for the entire school. We have 5 school psychologists, 6 social workers, 9 speech and language pathologists, 3 occupational therapists, 2 physical therapists, 3 AP teachers or adaptive PE teachers, 1 teacher of the visually impaired, and 73 case managers. We also use a number of outside consultants, such as clinical psychologists, audiologists, neuropsychologists, orientation and mobility experts, assistive technology, behavioralists, again, in different cases when they're necessary.
So can I ask a question about the 12 and up? Is that the post, the transition kids?
Yeah, so the
Is that
18 to
why it jumps
21.
up?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's another data dig that I would think to do, because again, going back to a previous slide, when the idea was not to have these services continue your whole life, when we look at the high school, we're still getting a large number of referrals.
Are they the same kids?
That
No,
they're not.
They're all different. They're all new.
Well, no, they're not all new, but it's.
That would
we-
be the interesting piece
yeah.
I would like to see, is because if that is one of your missions, to
Right.
try to get them out, how many are you successful with?
Yeah, so and that's something that we can gather with time.
Yeah.
I know just historically since I've been here, we've had a large number of referrals at the high school level,
Just
which is
fairly
not
recently.
typical. Usually by the time you get to the high school, it kind of dies off
Yeah,
because they've
yeah.
already been
So
identified.
these are new.
I think a piece of that is a lot of the social and emotional issues that are
Yeah.
happening today.
Yep.
And that seems to be the area where we keep on targeting,
Yeah,
that we're
precious
getting
kids
getting kiddos that maybe did fine academically, and then due to social emotional concerns, it's a different world, that they're
makes sense.
getting flagged up at the high school. So it is odd. We are getting, again, a number of referrals and a number of students qualifying at the high school, that I've never experienced again in 20 years in special ed. Usually by that time it's really starting to drop
slow
off.
down, yeah. Interesting.
Can I say, I was kind of concerned with this slide when I see Mr. McCann standing up in a kayak.
So I think next year we should both go on this. So that was good. That was, I think it was Narrow River. And that was Dale White and Maureen LeClaire's class. That's just a really nice picture. They got him out in the river for the entire day, did some kayaking. A lot of people, it's funny, I got an email from my department head, and I think it started off like, you're going to think I'm crazy. And then it went on saying, like, this is what their hopes, like, we're thinking about taking, these kids out in the kayak and I've never done anything like this. And I said, well, he seems a good guy. Nothing to lose. But they pulled it off. They did a great job. And I know there's a bunch of pictures, online about this, but that was a nice one to add.
Is that his empty one there? And did he crawl across the, how did he get over there? See, the middle one, there's nobody in that one. So is that his? And then, but I don't know how he
I don't
moved
know.
across.
We'll have him come next.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, just gonna say, he walked on water, exactly.
Yeah, right. So again, out of those 743 students, again, we have 608 students in inclusion, 109 students in a special inclusion program, and we have 20 students out of district. I really want to point out that, that inclusion word. So what that means that at some point, that the children are included in a typical classroom at some point in the day, which, that's huge. You didn't see those numbers, again, going back a decade. And that's just excluding the preschool walk-ins, which Denise will talk about. If you look at our out-of-district numbers, we are significantly below the average. I want to say, especially for a large district, and we don't have our own off-campus alternative school to try to lower those numbers, like a lot of our surrounding districts, such as North Kingston has their Davisville Academy, Charahoe has their own separate campus, Warwick has their own separate campus at Draper Ave, and West Warwick at the Maisie Quinn School. So they all have kind of like a midway stop to out of district. We don't have that, and we're having much lower numbers. Out of those 20 students, I know this comes up a lot with the out of district. Out of those 20 students who are placed out of district, sometimes the reason for that is DCYF will actually be the LEA. So they are actually the person who's determining placement, not me. It's oftentimes they'll put children in residential homes for different reasons. It may be the Rhode Island School for the Deaf, again, something that would be very difficult to replicate at that scale here in Coventry. Or they might just have a temporary need that needs to be placed, that we can't meet the needs here. One thing that I will say is, our children are so accepting in Coventry, and the staff is very dedicated and talented that, and I'm sure Fred and Denise will back me up because we go to a lot of these out of district placements. I don't think there's really any placement out there that we couldn't surpass the quality of education that they claim that they can offer. You drive by some of these places and they look great from the outside. You're not going to get the same service that you would here in Coventry. We just have really good teachers. They know their stuff. Let's see, I think we're ready for the next one. So I'm going to have Denise come over and take care of the child outreach.
Okay, this is our child outreach data for 2017-18 from the Kids Count data. You can see we actually screened a few less kids than the year before. In parentheses is 16-17 data. That first number, 467, just know that year they didn't divide out non-residents, so you actually add the non-residents in. So Lisa and her team have screened 371 students last year, 45 referrals last year. The year before we only had 27 referrals. This year we're only at 13 so far. She does also screen non-residents, so that's if we have children in our community preschools who are not Coventry residents. We do that as a courtesy for our neighborhood districts, and most of them do it for us. There's a couple that do not. Percentage screened in 17-18. K1 does not mean kindergarten first. It means K1 is year before kindergarten. She screened 64% of the students from the Kids Count. That's because she sits at every single kindergarten registration and signs them up for screening. So she gets the kids just before kindergarten. She still struggles to find those 3- and 4-year-olds. So she screened 45%. We were still above the state average for the screening, but obviously we want to be able to find more of those kids. This year she did a mass mailing and to look for more of the kids, try to access it. She works with DHS. She screens in the community to try to find the children, but sometimes we just can't get them all, so we are above. That's where we're at with child outreach. Our preschool data, so currently we have 78 preschoolers that require special ed services, and we have 93 peers that we service within the school department. We run 10 half-day sessions of preschool at Washington Oak. Of our children, their environments we have 42 kids who are serviced in an integrated preschool, and 8 that are in a general ed classroom at Washington Oak. That's our itinerant model, so we are doing the state pilot in 2 of our preschools, and 8 children are serviced in that model. Plus, we do that pilot in the community, and we service 8 children at Child Inc. And those numbers are going up quite high at Child Inc. We also have 3 other students in the community that we service in the community. We're not official partners in the program with them, but we do service them in their community setting. The 17 that get serviced in other setting, that is walk-in speech, and if we have anybody who is homebound or hospitalized. Those students, the reason they're serviced in other setting is because we do not yet have mandatory state pre-K, but hopefully when that comes about, which according to the governor is coming, we will have more of those students serviced in. We do allow our students who are walk-in speech to register for our lottery. So quite a few of them get in our service within that 42 number. So some of those students are just getting speech services within our program. Our average, I think in your data, I was very bragging a little bit yesterday because we got the state data for our indicator 6 from the year before, and I think they put the chart in your thing so you can look how we compare.
Yes, we saw it,
You
yeah.
can see how we compare to other districts, but that's last year's data. This year's live data, and I was proud of myself because I did data, and I said to Fred, I did my data pretty close because this is my data by
Yeah.
manually counting. So where we're at for this year is we have 78.2% of our preschoolers receiving service in the general ed setting, which is up from last year, which was 72%.
Yep.
And the state average is only 49%. What that means is we are in a very good position when we do have universal pre-K come along because we are servicing our kids in the general ed setting. You'll see on that chart, there's a lot of districts have less than half of their children in general ed setting. So, I mean, as far as expanding, our numbers stayed pretty consistent this year from the year before, without a lot of expansion, but we did add some 4-year-olds that get service in that general ed model. And our goal is when the state opens up the lotteries for state pre-Ks, that we can get some. So I am ready to go. Just got to find some space to do that. But we are in a great place for that because of these numbers and because of our Bright Star rating. So the applications are done by your quality of your program. We're at a 4-star overall, but we have a 5-star in every category but that environment. And we're just waiting for another visit, and hopefully we can get that up. That's where preschool is right now.
Cool, thanks. Nice.
Good evening. Next up, I'm going to give you a snapshot overview of our programs at the elementary level. And I'm also going to receive some help with that. I brought 2 VIP guests with me, very important principals, who will be able to give you some firsthand experiential information about 2 of our programs. So the elementary level, the vast majority of our students is receiving inclusion supports from an inclusion teacher. A small number of our students are on the caseload of what we call intensive support teacher. Please do not think that those are self-contained programs. Those are still inclusion services. It's just for children who may need a little bit more pull-out services. And those teachers also have more teacher assistant supports so that those students have more adult support to help with a successful inclusive component to their program. We currently have intensive support programs at 3 of our schools, Black Rock, Tioga, and Washington Oak. And then we also have our specialized programs, which we're very proud of, because when Mr. Wilson just reviewed the numbers of out-of-district students in those programs in other districts may be students at risk of being placed in out-of-district schools, away from their local communities, away from their friends, and so on. So snapshots, we have currently 3 specialized programs at the elementary level. The SCORE program at Hopkins Hill, which is a clinical/therapeutic program. Then we have our life skills program at Tyoke, and you see the two pictures that we've included in this slide is the life skills program was one of the programs that moved from Washington Oak to Tyoke, and the picture on the left is early summer when construction just started, and then the picture on the right is at the end of the summer how the space was totally transformed in a very high quality learning environment for life skills students, especially having a bathroom, accessible bathroom in the classroom has saved a lot of time. And then at Western Coventry, we have a program to support students who are on the autism spectrum, but in addition to that, also have pretty significant behavior and social emotional support needs. We also provide homebound instruction to a small amount of students. Those typically are students with severely compromised immune systems who, for medical reasons, it is contraindicated for them to be in an environment where they would be exposed to hundreds of people. And a lesser known fact is that we also provide quite a lot of support to students attending private schools. To give you an idea, we're supporting students currently at Father Doyle, West Bay Christian Academy, Tender Hearts, and Our Lady of Mercy, and that can range from conducting evaluations, helping them out with developing and implementing interventions, and or providing special education services. And as you probably are aware of, for the students with the most significant needs, we also provide services during the summer in our extended year program. So next up, it is my pleasure to welcome Mrs. Kathy Tankrell, the principal of Hopkins Hill, and then Mrs. Amy Anzalone, the principal at Western. And the reason why I call it the Strive/Houghton Academy program is we've had many conversations around the Strive program, and we really want it. It is a high quality program. And in this day and age, when you offer a high quality program, you tend to call yourself an academy. So that was one of the reasons why we switched to academy. And it actually has a really nice ring to it when the bus arrives, that there's an announcement that the bus for the students in the Houghton Academy has arrived. So without further ado, I welcome Mrs. Tankrell and Mrs. Anzalone.
Hi, everybody. So I want to give you a little bit of an update on our SCORE programs. Currently, we have two SCORE programs at Hopkins Hill. One is for students in K2, and the other is for students in grades 3 through 5. Now, the 3 through 5 program has been there for a number of years, but the K2 program is new. We got the K2 program about 3 years ago. So in our K2 program, we have 5 students, and we're supporting 2 other students who are not enrolled in SCORE, but they are, one has an IEP, one doesn't. And we're in the process of looking at their programming, so SCORE is helping to support them. Of those students, I'm going to start with 2nd grade. We have 3 in 2nd grade, and the 3 students are 100% fully included in the regular education classroom. All of the students in SCORE minimally go to lunch, recess, and itinerants, but these 3 in 2nd grade are fully included with academics. Their support is more along the lines of behavioral supports. In grade 1, we have 1 student, and that student is probably 50% included academically, spends the morning in the regular ed setting, and then goes back after lunch and recess with peers, goes back to the SCORE setting where they work on some social emotional type activities and regulation activities. And then in kindergarten, we have 1 student who has a similar program, morning in regular kindergarten, and then afternoon learning some skills, and then the other 2 students that we're supporting. So what it's important to note about children in K2 and K1, the students in K1 are still in the process of being diagnosed or having their diagnoses reviewed. They may be experiencing many med changes as the families and physicians try to mitigate some of the symptoms. And they're also in the process of just starting to learn self-regulation strategies and skills, and some of them for the very first time. Many of the parents are not equipped sometimes to handle children that are extremely challenging, and they need sometimes as much support as the students. And the time in their regular education program gradually increases as we're able to decrease some of the supports. By the time the students are in grade 2, they are more adept at using their regulation skills and strategies. They can do so more independently. The support looks more at triggers in the regular ed setting in order to anticipate what might present a problem as the academics become a little more rigorous and more involved. And then the supports also help them reinforce problem-solving skills and using some of the strategies. So some of the strategies might include breathing, big deal, little deal, I can handle it. So those are all things that are directly taught to the students by the psychologist and the social worker and the teachers, and then reinforced by the teacher assistants. So in grades 3 through 5, we have 8 students. In grade 3, there are 3 third graders. One of them is completely, fully included academically, has behavioral supports. Many of the students in the SCORE program in both K2 and 3-5, they don't have academic needs. Many of them do not have academic goals in their IEPs. They have more of the behavioral type goals. 2 of the students in grade 3 are significantly below academically, so those academics take place in their SCORE classroom, and they also go to the reading specialists and the math specialists for interventions in addition to that. Most of them go to science with their regular education peers. Regardless of their academics, they're supported in that setting, and that provides them with an opportunity to learn to collaborate and work in groups. In grade 4, we have 3 students. Again, one is 100% included with behavioral supports, and the other 2 are need a lot of academic support. They're below grade level peers, so they receive those academics in a smaller setting, working at their instructional level. By grades 3 through 5, children who have been with us are pretty regulated, and the support they receive is more to reinforce appropriate choices that they make and appropriate decisions in having them do so independently. They've, at this point, built trusting relationships with their team of adults. They know who their go-to people are, and they're more able to self-advocate. Those students seldom occur unless something really unexpected happens. And they've learned, what a wild card day is or a wild card change in the schedule. A lot of them have visual supports and visual schedules. They have point sheets at the end of the day. Even the children who are fully included go back to the like their homeroom SCORE setting at the end of the day to talk about their day, cash in their points, and get their acknowledgments. A couple of other important things to keep in mind with our programs. Many of the diagnoses are comorbid, so there's more than one existing at the same time. And so our children have a variety or a combination of all of these. Emotional disturbance, post-traumatic stress, oppositional defiant disorder, ADHD, anxiety disorder, which usually manifests as OCD or school refusal, reactive attachment disorder, Asperger's, autism, so they're higher functioning than the students would be in the STRIVE program. And they have trauma with multiple adverse childhood experiences. So, sometimes I wish I could unsee and unknow some of the things I've seen and I know, but these children come to school with all of that baggage. And so they're learning for the first time what a safe place is and how to cope in that environment. We have an amazing staff that's dedicated to the students. They love working with that population, and I think that's really an important key. You have to love the challenge. You have to love that population in order to be successful. In terms of having them accepted into the regular, into the school, we've done a lot of development, staff development with trauma, equity, classroom management, building relationships, and a lot of work really understanding the dual impact of poverty and trauma on brain development and how a child can function. So our staff has been very welcoming. hosting and having these students included in their classrooms. But a lot of it really now, one of the next steps that we're working on in an ongoing way is building the capacity of the classroom teacher so that they are as comfortable working with these students in their classrooms as the SCORE team is and as the TAs are. So that's the next stage of the work that we're doing with them. So we like to say that we can't control what happens to these children when they go home or when they go home over the weekend. We can only control our response to them. We meet them where they are, we show them that we love them, and we move forward one step at a time. And so that's what our SCORE program at Hopkins Hill is all about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I feel so blessed to talk about a real huge success that's taken place at Western Coventry. It's just about 5 or 6 points. Western Coventry was lucky enough to be able to move the Houghton Academy over to our school this year. And I feel like probably the most important thing for me to start off with is the staff that's in this classroom that has made this classroom a tremendous success, and the teacher first and foremost. Jen Houghton, who is a 20-year veteran of the Coventry Public Schools and an expert at working with children with special education, and just a fantastic person, has made this classroom a huge success. The TAs that support that classroom are loving and open to learning every single day, our new students, and making this program a success. The team that is made up of the related service providers, our psychologist, our OT, and our APE teacher, and our speech and language teacher have also worked collaboratively to make every single day a success in that room. And I say that honestly, every day, even on the days where there are more challenges, I go in there with a smile and I leave that classroom with a smile. It is an amazing place. I also have to thank the district for an amazing transition of this classroom. Every material that these students had in terms of even their private schedules were transferred over from Washington Oak to Western, and I did not have to purchase or do anything to set this room up for it to be a success. It was very well handled. I also want to commend the consultation that happened between Western and Washington Oak. The professionals at Washington Oak took time in the spring to meet with our team to help us learn about the new students that were coming in. They were also available to us all summer and in the fall, so that when we had questions, they sent people over. Fred and Brad, I called them one day and said, I need some advice about some things. The next day, they had the teacher that was in that classroom last year at my building for the morning to meet with my team. So the consultation between Western and Washington Oak has been outstanding, and I couldn't ask for more. We also set up at the end of the year an opportunity for the families that were transitioning over to Western to come in and have private time with us, to walk through our school, to see the classroom, which wasn't really put together at the time, but to see the classroom, to meet the professionals in our building, and to feel comfortable there. We also opened ourselves up to them in the summer and right before school started again, so that they could then bring those kids back into the school or call with any questions. I also want to bring 2 other points up before I finish. So originally the plan was that there might be 2 classrooms coming to Western, and so there was a beginning plan, and when we found out that it was only one classroom was gonna come initially, I was concerned about taking the space we had talked about, because it was a large space for 2 classrooms. And I just happened to be meeting with some of the teacher assistants in the building, and we were talking about some other things that were going on last year, and teacher assistant said, hey, I have a great idea. Why don't we think about this space in the building for our new classroom that's coming? A space that I hadn't even considered. It was originally the teacher's room, which meant that our teacher's room was going to have to move to a very compact and small area. Western is really challenged for space. And so I met with each teacher, each grade level, and said, how do you feel about this? moving our teachers' room, which was actually also a resource room for teachers, to a smaller space, which gave them less of a capacity to meet together, to eat together, to work in that space. Every single teacher at Western Coventry said, absolutely, I think that's a great idea. So the location of this room actually is located in the very heart of our school, and couldn't be in a more perfect place now for all of our community to see the work that happens with our kids that are in the Houghton Academy every day. And then finally, I have to thank Physical Plant because they worked with me all summer about designing this space to make it really special for the students and the staff that is in this room. And I particularly want to mention Ken Murphy, who problem solved with me when I said, no, I'm not quite looking, I don't want it like that. Or the teacher ended up coming in and saying, I think this would be a perfect addition to this classroom. Ken Murphy really said, I can do it. And he made things happen. Also, the custodians at Western put some special care to make sure that that room was ready for the new kiddos. So I honestly could not envision a better way to transition a classroom, and we are blessed to have the Houghton Academy. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Kathy. Is it sleeping on you? So I'll make this really quick because Fred kind of went over a lot of the programs. So in the secondary, we have the inclusion and the intensive support. Again, the specialized programs, the CLA, we have at the middle school and the high school, again, for social emotional needs, the life skills at both the high school and the middle school. We have a planning center at the Feinstein Middle where they can go get some support, intensive support for the ALC at the middle school. We have a ASC room, which is also Autism Spectrum Disorder program at the middle school, which is basically like a home base for students who are high functioning on the spectrum, where they can kind of go back and work on their schedules and get prepared. It's a nice little home base for them, but they're included. And then the planning center at Coventry High School, where kids will come down at different points of the day, do work, receive support there, and then go back into the inclusion setting. We do some private school support as well. We do the extended school year as well as the lower grades. And then the big piece is that transition program, which we mentioned, that 18 to 21. You're going to get to see some really nice pictures of the job sites and them in the community, a couple slides at the very end. But again, that's where they work on navigating their community, their independent skills, their employment and on the job site, and their self-advocacy, where they're really learning all those, where they might have met some of their graduation requirements, but we want to meet those goals of the IEP before they go out there into the workplace. And you see some nice pictures of the different environments. But any questions on that?
So up until this point, we've talked a lot about inputs. What kind of programs do we offer? What kinds of services? What kind of means for the students to access that regular education curriculum? But what's also important is look at the other part, the outcomes. What are we accomplishing? Are our supports effective? So one data set that we've been looking at has been the statewide testing, the PARC, and now the RICAS. And what we're seeing with the RICAS is continuing of the achievement gains that we already saw in the PARC. And I copied some bar graphs. The top one is ELA literacy, and then the bottom one is mathematics. So in our office, we tend to focus more on the left-hand side of the bar rather than the right-hand side, because as Mr. Wilson and Mr. Lev's already mentioned, our goal is to exit students through access to the regular education curriculum. So almost by definition, when we have success, students are exiting from special education, and that's why we actually want to see only a small percentage of students being proficient, because those students typically should no longer be eligible for special education. We should have met our goal. We should have brought them back to close to grade level. So when we look at the left-hand side of the bar graphs, both with regard to not meeting expectations and then partially meeting expectations, what we definitely want is to have as few students as possible in the red zone. The not so good news is that still slightly more than half of our students with disabilities fall in that lowest performance category. The good news is that both in ELA and math, it is 5% lower than the state average in that red zone. And what we're seeing is that those students have migrated to the partially meeting expectations. So what we're seeing is in similarly to what we've seen with regard to all of our students, that in Coventry, we seem to have quite a lot of our students in the partially meeting expectations category. And those students are easier to move to the meeting category than those students in the not meeting expectations range. Then a small number of students are on the alternate assessment. Those are typically students who attend our life skills programs. And there's a federal requirement that districts cannot have more than 1% of students on the alternate assessment. Rhode Island as a state is out of compliance. Rhode Island as a whole has more than 1% of students on the alternate assessment. However, Coventry does not. Both in ELA and math, we are below the 1%, which means, again, that thanks to the help of everybody who's educating our students, that we're really good at making sure that those students who can access the Common Core and the regular classroom have that option. So to give you an idea, for ELA, only 9 out of 43 districts are below the 1%, and for math, only 10 out of 43. The 43 also include a number of charter schools. We have about 36 public school districts and then a small number of charter schools. We also, as a district as a whole, are no disproportionate. Now, what that means is that every year the Department of Education, for each one of the 14 disability categories, they make a big grid and compare or combine disability categories with ethnicity and socioeconomic status. So that it gives you about a little over 100 different categories for which the Department of Education has developed algorithms to calculate whether there's any disproportionality compared to other Rhode Island district and national averages. In the past, we have been disproportionate, but over the past couple of years, because of targeted supports and professional development, we've been successful in, and currently we're not disproportionate since this year in any of the categories. And then also for the second year in a row, our Medicaid audits did not reveal any issues at all. What that means is we get some partial reimbursement from the federal government for the more medically oriented services that we provide. And then once a year, about, I believe, between 20 and 40 services are picked at random, and we need to prove that those services took place on the day that we claim, that those were provided by certified professionals, that there's a log of that therapy session, and we need to provide all that evidence. And again, a clean audit. Obviously, that's not to say that we don't have a lot of work ahead of us, especially when it comes to achievement gaps. But a lot of the data that we are looking at and that we're closely monitoring is showing movement in the right direction. Any questions about this? Thank you.
It's nice to see, everything come to fruition from last year where it was just a plan and now it's in place. Really.
Oh, okay, that was right. That was an old one. We took that out.
Yeah. Now we're going to pictures.
So this was a nice call. This is, I think, from the, was it the president of Special Olympics? Was it?
CEO.
CEO, yeah. So no one does inclusion better than Coventry High. Let that sink in for a minute.
Yeah.
And you know, I promised some nice pictures of our 18 and 21-year-olds out in the environment, out in the workplace, and you know, navigating the neighborhood. But that's it. Does anybody have any questions? Dave?
I just have a comment.
Mhm.
If that's okay.
That's fine, yeah.
When I got on school committee in 2013, in June 2013, I would say I get at least 4 or 5 calls a month from parents in my district who had either a complaint or who had an issue with special education. Now, I don't get a call at all. So, and I tell this to Mr. Lex all the time. And I think what helps is when you have a leader who has worked in the special ed field, like Mr. Levis, and like you, and like Fred Schock, and like Denise, and like Kathy Kinkler, and like Amy Azalone, and everybody else here, including Kelly Aronakis and Deb. I mean, it's like, you know, what I see happening is very special, particularly since you've been on board.
I think you pointed out, I think it's just getting that right set of dominoes.
Well, he chose
Yeah.
you. He chose you. And
But-
now I know why he chose you.
E-
And I know why he chose his team. And you know, you're doing, Mr. Levis, you're doing extraordinary work, as is your staff.
I mean, it's the teachers down to the aides in the classroom. Really, it's a mindset.
Right.
And once
It
people
is.
start buying into the mindset,
It is.
Then it works.
It is.
yeah, it starts working.
It works. And not one call in 2017, since we've had,
Knock on wood.
since Craig's been
We
super.
got a
Hold the
call
lighting
back.
up
Yeah, I got a
tomorrow.
call back.
Okay. So now you
Any
go
other
to
comments
practice.
before I comment, or any questions, Donna? I just want to thank you to your team and everyone. I have to say, I'm so glad the transition worked, and it looks like it's. And I know there must have been apprehension, and to hear the stories from our principals was very heartfelt for me. I can tell how much these students mean, what these teachers mean to everyone on this team, and I think both of you used the word love, loving your students, and I really, I don't want to cry. So, these kind of presentations always make me realize the wonderful things that happen in this district that are amazing. And I wish all parents, and I think our kids probably, because so many of our kids are included, I think our kids know it more than our parents, quite frankly, that parents that have regular ed kids don't even see it, get it. But it's just a wonderful thing to see. And I just thank you all. I think all the people that make this work in this town, our kids are lucky.
And the CTA.
Both the regular ed and the special needs kids. It's a blessing for both of them and all of the people involved. So I thank you for all your hard work and all of the people that are the professionals that are in there doing the OT and the PT and the social workers and just everyone. It's just amazing. I'm very
just wanna
grateful to hear this.
Point out one more time, again, there was a lot of back work and a lot of meetings and a lot of preparation, but without Jason Martin and his crew.
That too, yeah,
and,
everyone.
Like the amount that we had down to the last wire. I mean, Fred will tell you at Tioga. I think
was
Fred even
amazing
joined
that it
out and was like
happened,
a staff member for the day. But like Jason really and his whole crew came through.
Yeah, I was
It's
glad
huge.
you explained that those two pictures next to each other. I looked at the one and I was like, what are they trying to show me? I didn't even get it that it was the before and after. I was
We now
like,
have bathrooms
wow.
in the middle of classrooms. Makes it easier.
I know. Yeah, I got that those were bathrooms. I got those were toilets, but
And we
I was
can't-
like, I didn't get why.
And
It
we
was
can't
like-
forget about Mr. Lucian in the back there. He has done a lot. He has done a lot of.
He has.
I just want to commend the whole team, everybody involved. Great job, and I
Thank
love
you.
this presentation. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, really. Any comments from the citizens gathered or any questions from anyone before we move on? Are you all set, Mr. Levis? Okay. Then I believe we can move on to Ms. Sarah.
Can I just say, in Ms. Mangiarelli's report, if you go to the second page, there is a typo in there.
Oh, boy.
It just says that we are not properly following. I think you meant we are now properly following, right? Just when,
7.
that's okay. I just wanted to.
Well, that was the budget work.
That was the budget
Work,
I
yeah,
want
that was the work session.
We are.
So I'll go quickly through this.
Okay.
Our annual audit should be done by the 31st of January, so that's significantly ahead of time compared to last year. We did clean out most of the side funds, either funds that had a deficit or funds that really should never have been set up as side funds anyways, so we did consolidate a lot to the general fund. The last one that we have to tackle is the retiree benefit account. That's always been handled separately. Where we ran into issues was in the last contract, there was some early retirement incentives that were paid out that went in that account, so it became not self-sustaining. So that's one that we're working to put a plan in place. It's been there for several years, but I anticipate that there will be a comment on that, and we'll have a plan of action, which is the typical protocol for that. The FY19 budget to actual is included in your packet. So I'm still having it at a break even. Again, we've really stopped a lot of spending at the schools, so some of that supply and equipment money is really offsetting some of our other
Some of the other issues, yeah,
that we're
unfortunate.
having. Our substitute costs are about $20,000 higher than where we were at this point last year. And it's hard to believe that because we're having such a hard time filling a lot of positions, especially in special ed world. So we are tracking that. We did raise the prices to try and increase how much fill rate was, but we're definitely still struggling with that. Our school lunch audit, which is the last of our federal audits, is scheduled for the week of the 21st. The high school in Black Rock were selected for the on-site reviews. It's a pretty lengthy process. We've been working on it since September, getting them all of the documentation that they need. And we have had some bumps in with the transition from one research company to another, so a lot of training for the school lunch personnel has taken place over the past few months to get them up to speed to where they do need to be so that we are properly following all USDA regulations. And we've done a lot at central office as well as looking at applications, making sure that we're processing applications correctly, using the correct data, classifying eligibility properly. So it's definitely been an undertaking, and we're all excited to get that here and gone. We'll also be going out to the schools. Linda Ide and Don Hartman from my office will go out. I'll probably do one or two of the schools as well to go out unannounced to the schools to do some
Audits.
monitoring and verification of the meal plans as well. And then the last piece, we are still working on the use of impact fees. We're just making sure we have all final quotes. A lot of those will be Sonatrach, which will be sole source, but we wanted a letter from them saying that they won't allow another company to come in and overlay on top of their existing software, so we won't go out to bid for that portion of it. But the fire plan and whatnot, those will all be bid out, so that will come forward the next meeting.
Okay. Great. Any questions for Sarah? Mr. Pearson?
Mic is on. Not a big comment, just overall general concern with the budgeting process that we're not getting our audits in until January 31st, but our budget's due February 8th. Do you anticipate in future years we'll have the audits done earlier?
So just keep in mind that it's a town budget as well, so we're
Right.
a department of the school.
We're waiting on them.
The reason it was so late 31st is not horrible for a deadline, especially given the size and given that the town operated without a finance director for a significant portion of the year. I would like to think that next year, there's no reason that we shouldn't have it completed by December 31st. I can say that it will absolutely require a change in some of the audit approach that's taking place. It seems that the fieldwork does tend to drag on a little bit longer than I think it needs to be dragged on. So I think at the end, I know John has the same sentiments that I do, that we will probably sit down with the auditors and come up with a different approach. I will also take some responsibility. I was not planning on being out for a good chunk of the month of September, which did delay it a little bit. But again, going to January 1st is not horrible or necessarily abnormal for a district this size, given all the turnover that we've had here.
Right, and a credit, I guess, to your department, we're not anticipating any surprises. Just moving forward, God forbid you ever leave us. It's important for decision-making all around to make sure we have the audit information, and just so in case there's a surprise waiting for us. All right.
And some of the nuance too, just so you know, is that with we have this agreed upon procedures report for our chart of accounts, which is a separate report. And we have the main audit, and then they have this municipal transparency portal that it's almost like a chicken before the egg. We can't complete one until we have the other component. So like I couldn't complete the final chart of accounts review until I have all the audited adjustments. So I got those on Monday. So, and then it has to go through the state for that turnaround process. So some of it is, again, I think revisiting the audit approach with the auditors to kind of move things back and make sure that when they come out, they're out here for a dedicated period of time and not flip-flopping back and forth. So I agree, and I think by next year that we should be on that.
Okay.
We should be targeted for 12.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anything from the public for Sarah? As always, thank you.
I just want to say quickly, no, that's, I don't need a response there, but I think, Mr. Pearson brought up about surprises, and I think the work that's been done, and I understand the purpose in terms of the audit, but I feel that the checks and balances and some of the governance work that's been put in place, but just the reorganization that has been orchestrated by Sarah, like we've identified, we brought forward that balance had been carried on for eons for the food service management, whatever it is, food service management company, in addressing, looking at the pension and addressing and the reevaluation and, and then a lot of day-to-day looking at our data, cleaning up our data that's going to impact our state aid. And I feel that, we have a really good handle. Granted, there's so many variables as we discussed in the budget, but I want to thank Sarah and that whole department. And even just the way it's empowering all the leadership throughout the district in terms of the whole budget process. I think it was last year people had said that they, very rarely had they been asked certain questions. And so having more ownership across the board. So I think that's what's really making a difference. So that's it.
Thanks. All right. I guess we can move on to number 13, which is the discussion and approval of the capital improvement plan.
Right. So
see
you have
Nick in
a packet in front of you. You have the supporting documents. I think what's key for this year is that I had mentioned before, we're going to be going through a process where we're going to look at, we've put a lot of things on here. The only thing that's changed is you're going to see really the HVAC upgrades, and the gym floor replacement in terms of the priorities. And then we put in those, you'll see those three next in the first column, the three next items, the security upgrades, fire alarm upgrades, and school intercom systems. Those are things that came out of our some of them out of Secure Our City, and the other fire upgrade happened when we had the fire marshal, and that's at the middle school. Because down the road, we have to, we're not sure, is this community going to sink millions of dollars into all of our structures? And does it make sense to do that? So what we're really looking at is this first year and those items that we need for the HVAC upgrades, the gym floor, for those two are for NEASC, and then the other issue, the three areas that we need to do for health and safety and security. And like I said, well, next school committee meeting, we'll be coming forward and we might cover some of those areas with our impact fees. So we've kept a lot of the items. I mean, the fence, I remember last year, that was my issue, putting the fence on. I met with the town manager. It hadn't been approved by the school committee. I was asked to put it on, and I shouldn't have put it on, but I did. So that's obviously removed. But everything else are the same items we've been asking for since I've been here, received $0. There's still, you see ceiling tiles, you see furniture. The generator is a big issue. Jason, didn't want to push it off, but because it's the original generator, and our school is a safety, in terms of an emergency area, but we definitely want to take care of the issues that are going to be preventing us from NEASC accreditation. So again, I'm not saying to discount the years out, but I feel that when we go through that process, it may help us as not only as a school board and administration and a school community, but the entire community, help prioritize some of these other areas. That's what I'm hoping for.
Now, I'm assuming this is going before the planning commission, this list, and then they forward it on to the town council?
Yes, that's why we have to bring it forward tonight, because like I said, we had found out just a couple of days ago that this needs to go before the planning commission on, is it January 16th, Sarah? So we don't have another school committee meeting.
Now, will you have, should we be there for January 16th to express, or someone from the school department be there to express what definitely, top priority and,
Well, that's what we're doing. I mean, I think we're going to need to cover those. We're going to need to complete those 5 items in that first column this year or next year.
For NEASC, yeah.
It's been what we've communicated
Oh, wow.
council committee all along.
The finance director is aware.
Right, the
Yep.
finance director is aware, as I mentioned earlier,
Tell me.
the finance meeting for the town, we brought it up again, and the town was very open and honest, saying, yes, we understand that this is a requirement for you. So I think starting with these priorities will give us that, we'll start that snowball effect of getting some of that reimbursement
Yeah.
in.
But what
And
I'm
then
saying,
safe projects, so that when we do that master educational plan, we're not necessarily touching something that could get undone in a future year. So that was the other reason we looked. We know that high school gym and that high school HVAC system is going to remain pretty much regardless of what other plan comes in.
well, today I had a conversation, because I speak to him frequently, the chair of the planning commission, Russ Crossman. If there's a representative from the school department there saying, these are the priorities, and this is what we need, and why we need it, and that it's going to affect our accreditation, it would be placed in the minutes of the planning commission, and not only that, the commission itself would have comments for it. For instance, Russ Crossman would say, okay, this makes a lot of sense. Just to be there. Now, if you don't want to be there, or nobody else wants to be there,
I have
I'll
a
be happy
commitment.
I'll be happy to be there.
Yeah, we can take it. I mean,
Have a commitment.
so to me though, it goes back to the point that, and we talked about trust and transparency, and we've been transparent the entire time. I mean, I have no problem showing up, but the fact that my presence there and documentation in the minutes, to me, that goes back to the old way that we're trying to.
Right.
And I don't want to play into that, but I mean, but definitely whatever we need to do, I think this is something that, it plays into also that 1.5% too. And they're well aware
And they know that it's a
we
requirement.
can only,
That helps.
Sarah mentioned that before in the budget process, we can only account for so much of that through our operating budget. So they're aware of that too. So they're going to have to meet that and support that. So, but to answer your question, I have no problem being there for that. But I hope that, if we have to sit there and beg and plead and then that
No, you're not
goes
gonna-
back to, but I'm saying that goes back to the old way of doing business. And I'm hoping that,
That's January 16th,
Yeah.
Mr. Levis.
Mhm.
I'll be there with you.
I won't be there. Nope, I have a commitment.
I don't think the planning board would have a problem with it anyway.
I don't think,
No.
you know,
You know, look,
they,
I mean,
they have no problem.
anybody
They
that's
probably
been or has children in the
always,
school
they've always
knows
approved
that
this when it comes.
right,
We need this.
right.
Yep. All right. So are there any questions before we move on this, James?
I have 3 questions.
All right.
Hold me to that. I'll save my soapbox one for the end. I was reading the description on the paving request. I'm a little concerned by that because the way it's stated in the lengthy request says all buildings need parking lot repaving. I don't believe that to be true because Hopkins Hill was done recently. So I'm not sure why it's worded that way.
I believe there were portions of Hopkins Hill,
I'm
but
not sure if all of it's done.
I mean, there
Well, the
was,
side lot, well,
yeah, every single parking lot, I mean,
needs paving.
needs
work.
paving.
Okay,
Yeah.
It has to be sealed.
I wanted to.
Yeah,
make sure.
I mean,
That's
yeah,
fine.
it's a mess.
I guess I'll vote this through, but I'm still questioning the way the sewer connection is on here. It really should be talking about the sewer plant, and if the connection becomes part of the plan, so be it. The town does not own the sewer line that runs down Reservoir Road.
Right,
So
right.
there's $250,000 is wishful thinking for a sewer connection there. The third point I have, actually, that was my soapbox one. Third point I have is, especially all the presentations you've given us this year, and Jason, or the past couple years, I would like to know why the physical plant vehicles is so far down the list. Do we reconsider moving that up the list
Well, I mean,
a bit?
so my honest opinion is you can take everything here, right? And other than where the health and safety, and move it around wherever you want.
Well,
I
sure.
feel that,
And
I don't.
I'm not trying to manipulate or micromanage. My point is, if we keep making a point that
Right.
the physical plant vehicle issue is a significant issue, however, when we put a prioritized list of capital improvements together and physical plant vehicles appears at the bottom, we're not sending the message to the council or the community that we really think it's a priority.
So
That's my concern.
And we have talked about the amount of money in our budget that we use to maintain vehicles. And I know we're in conversations, and again, we're in terms of procedurally where this falls, but I know we're in conversations.
Can I actually just interrupt there?
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
trying to switch this whole conversation up completely, and I don't know how I missed this one. So when we went through this, we were really focusing on next year, because knowing that we'll have this education master plan, really a lot of the years out are going to change. I'd actually make a recommendation that you make a motion to remove the vehicles. They're not considered capital. Again, as I spoke earlier, capital is a leasehold improvement, something that's attached to a building, adding on a building, renovation. Vehicles are equipment. They actually need to go into our operating budget unless it's some special arrangement with the town. And we actually did reiterate that with the finance directors of the.
So I'm a little confused. Townside considers vehicles capital.
They are not supposed to consider
Really?
it capital any longer unless they have a useful life of at least 10 years or more.
Ah.
So anything that's so.
Ours do.
I don't know if they're useful.
No, Craig. Useful life. of things.
Yeah, it's useful, that's the
We're
question.
still using them.
Oh, yeah.
Plow trucks, those are
Yeah.
considered capital. Pickup trucks for us are not going to be considered capital.
Right.
All right, pull them out. We should pull it off the list.
Pull it off then.
Thank you for the
All right, thank
explanation.
you.
I appreciate that.
But we are, I mean, we
Glad you
are
brought it
looking, I do agree, we are looking at that, but I think just with this list and the priority, I mean, I think we're going forward and being optimistic, but in the past, you know, that it's coming every year, coming forward with the list, knowing, you know, wanting to be wishful and hopeful, but knowing that,
The state has forced our hand, so we really have to make sure
Right.
we're putting
Yeah.
together an
Right.
actual priority.
well, and that's why I feel like for, and as Sarah said, for
This
this
year
coming
definitely
year,
is definitely the.
then that's those are the areas that we need, so,
Okay.
okay, thank you.
Sounds good.
We
Any
just
other
have to
questions?
Make that one
Yeah,
amendment. and-
just the one amendment, yeah. Any other, are we ready to motion?
Yes. Madam Chair, I'm ready. Okay, Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the capital improvement plan without the,
Physical plant
without the
vehicles.
physical plant vehicles as presented / amended.
I second the motion.
Any further discussion or questions from the committee? Anything from the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 4-0. Again, thank you again for this.
Thank you, Sarah.
Tell Jason thank you. I'm sure he was part of it. Moving on to 14, subcommittee updates. Is there anything from the policy? Mr. Pearson, did you hear that? Anything from
Policy
or-
subcommittee met today.
Oh, they did,
to,
okay.
We did.
Anything to update?
I think we have a final draft of distribution policy,
Distribution?
which will appear on a future meeting. We also
Wonderful.
covered a couple other policies that needed some tweaking.
Cool.
It was a good meeting.
Is there any talk about moving the meetings to a time where everybody, all the citizens can attend?
There certainly will be. I think we need to bring that up in our next meeting and discuss that a little further. Hoping to get another, once we fill the vacancy and we have a second member, I think that would be a more productive conversation then. But we had 2 representatives from PTA today, so that was good.
Good.
Wonderful, thank you. I think that might be it for our subcommittees that are active. So we can move on to, thank you, James. We can move on to 15, which is the superintendent's report.
So I will definitely try to be quick. So school safety, two areas. One is I had the incidents that took place in the middle school. We're still working with the police department. They're working with the Attorney General's office to have presentations given to the students. But I spoke to Mr. Lucian. I had reached out to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they put me in touch with individuals that are willing to do a presentation for parents around cyberbullying, bullying threats. And the issue with that, though, is unfortunately we've given them a couple of dates on the 28th, but because of the shutdown, they can only do, like right now, they're not able to do those events. They're able to do like anti-terrorism and other type of, national priority. So we're kind of in a wait and see, but it's important. I've had people say, it's not important. You're not taking this seriously. And it couldn't be anything further than the truth. I think we've addressed those situations that have taken place, and we've dealt with each situation individually, and there's been consequences and also therapeutic. We want to make sure that we support students and families no matter what situation, scenario. Every single day we deal with safety issues and try to make our schools as safe as possible. And I am meeting with the colonel. We haven't met in a while. We're going to meet Tuesday, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of these pieces. And he's still trying to think of other ways that he can continue to support the schools. They've been great partners. So the second part is Alice training. We had a conversation. We had a safety meeting yesterday with our district leadership team and the building administrators. And we talked about ways of implementing Alice training for the last group is our elementary staff. So I'll be coming forward to you. There's a couple things we have to be creative. We have to make sure that we can implement this plan, but I'll be coming back to you because we'll need your approval. Either the next school committee meeting or the first school committee meeting in February. But we want to make sure that all gets addressed this year, so we've had everybody trained in Alice. And that's the safety portion. Heating, I just want to talk. I've had people complain about heating or ask questions about heating. And I just want to be clear, like our heating systems are old, even though we have new boilers, they're old. The high school, you'll have classrooms that are 45 degrees, 48 degrees. And then you have classrooms that are 100 degrees and no kid, like in the 90s, because we can't regulate the heating system. And that happens, I'm sure, Mr. Lucian, at the middle school. Do you have classrooms at, right? Like, I mean, every building we have, and our building is ridiculous. Probably, it's been pretty good this week, but there's not a week that goes by where we're not complaining and trying to do things. And it's just indicative and symptomatic of our facilities. And so I just want to be clear. And I know people say, I've gotten a couple emails, or I had a phone call, and parents says, don't tell me it's about money and that the buildings are old. And it's like I said to her, I'm not going to lie to you. It's our buildings are old. And just because we put in new boilers, the whole entire system, that's why NEASC recognized the HVAC system at the high school, but it doesn't mean we don't have the same issues in all of our buildings. So it is what it is. I'm hoping that, again, not living in the past, that as we move forward and we use that money for technical assistance, we make some decisions, for this community, school community. But it's a problem. And, $60,000 a year, remember in our budget, $60,000 to do repairs. And we're very blessed that we have our electricians and our plumbers and our carpenters and mechanics, the amount of money that they save us, but we can only do so much. So I just wanted to go on the record with the heating. Timeline for principal positions, that our plan is we're going to advertise, and if we revise any job descriptions, we'll bring them back on the 24th to the school committee, because you had approved all the position when we did contracts. You approved the job descriptions that were connected with them. And our plan is to advertise at the end of, I'm trying to think, what month we in? January.
January.
Thank you. Advertise at the end of January. We would keep the positions open. So that would be for the high school principalship and for an elementary principalship in Black Rock. We'd keep those positions open probably right up to February vacation, which would give us 3 weeks. And then we would have a couple of rounds. We'll have a group that'll come together. We'll identify those committees. We'll make sure that we have comprehensive representation. And we'll have 2 rounds, a round where a committee will screen paper applications and then actually interview. And then that second round, that committee will move those applicants to a second interview. So and those applicants that they're going to move forward would be individuals that they would be comfortable having, as a principal. And so that should get us somewhere, somewhere in March, mid-March, we feel, which is a good time in terms of having an individual, if they're, depending on if that individual comes internally, if that individual's from another district, it's a good enough time that allows the replacement of those individuals. So if someone's leaving another district, they don't, they feel very fair. You want to leave your district in the right way. So we feel that's an appropriate timeline. I had talked to a couple of other superintendents, because our original plan was we thought we'd start posting like right around the holidays, and they suggested, you might want to wait to the end of January. That way, when you map out the timeline, we want to get the best individuals possible. I think, we talk a lot about leadership and at all levels in our district. And I feel very fortunate, we are very, I feel very blessed that, when we have disagreements in how we handle things, and but I think we do that privately, we do that professionally and respectfully, and yet we really work together as a unit. I feel, from the school committee to the educators and our support staff and our leadership team. So we want to bring in people that'll support that philosophy, and so that's kind of the timeline that we're looking for. And I'm sure there'll be more conversations we'll have. I know there's always, my intent is not to have a school committee member on. My belief is that, you guys hire me, and then my responsibility is to work with our leadership, which is everybody, and make sure we include the right people, and then to make recommendations to the committee. So I know that gets asked, but I just want to be clear about that. So that's about the timeline for the position. And then The ESSA school ratings, we'll do a presentation either probably in maybe the next school committee meeting. I won't make it too long, but I just want to say that this is the first time these ratings came out. And we had, was it 5 3-stars, right? No, 6 3-star schools. And we had 1 4-star school. But I think what we'll do is we'll give an overview of what the different variables are and impact the rating. But I was very, again, I think when we talked about the RICAS, we talked about our, the scores. We weren't shocked. When we look at the special education, we weren't shocked. We know we need to close the gaps. When we saw the data around the gender, I think all of our data, like, it's starting to make sense. The key is that, of course, the elephant in the room is now, what are we going to do to close those gaps? But you'll see that when we go through the data that we had several schools that just the way the way that the rating is laid out, we had several schools that would have been 4-star schools. But because of having a category, when they look at a specific category, and if that category was viewed as a school in itself, it knocks you down a complete score, a star. So we'll explain that a little bit more, but I think what's important for us to focus on are the things that we are doing, the curriculum work that we're doing. If we truly stick to our all-student agenda and make sure that not everybody gets the same, but they get what they need, and I feel very good and very comfortable with what's going on in our district. And, it's our job to try to make sure that we have the resources. It's my responsibility and working with others to make sure that, we mentioned 35 teachers are being requested. We know we can't put on 35 teachers, but we really need to look at where those needs are and try to do the best we can, because at the end of the day, if we don't provide the supports and the resources to our educators to do, how can we hold them accountable to do the best? So it's that balancing act. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I was, based on what's going around and what's going on in Rhode Island and what went on after the RICAS, when those ratings came out, I have to say that I was very pleased, especially when I drilled down looking at the data, seeing that we could have had several schools that were 4 stars and potentially 5-star. The last time that when the last thing I'll say was when Western Coventry was a commended school. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I shared this, but when I looked at the data, Coventry High School was only 10 points away from being a commended school, right? 10 points away, not too shabby. Now they've changed the rules in the assessment piece, and we're looking at different things. But anyways, we'll do a more comprehensive, but I just wanted to, on the record, speak a little bit about that. And we'll come back, like I said, at the 24th, depending on how long that meeting is, or do it at the first meeting in February. But I appreciate all the work that everybody did, and to get us where we are. And obviously there's a lot more work to do, but sometimes you got to stop and take a look and see how far you actually have come. So that's it.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about, if the rest of the members of the school committee can spend some time on the RIDE website and look at those ratings. They're very interesting, especially because you can see the other districts and see what star ratings they had. I was surprised when I looked at some other districts thinking they were going to be like, whoa, ahead of us, and not so much. There was some, so I agree that, and plus there's the SALT data there, so it's nice to be able to look back and forth and see how we compare. And so I wasn't shocked, but I wasn't like, oh my God, horrible. I thought it was in relationship to the rest of the state. And I just looked at a couple of districts, but it was kind of interesting. It wasn't like, oh, we're so bad or whatever. Anyway, so thank you, Mr. Levis. We'll be looking forward to that presentation. I don't have anything except one thing, which I think I'm hopefully Donna, you can help me with. It's that time of year where we need to be thinking about who's going to be doing the school committee reports at the town council. And so I tried looking on the website, the town's website, to see what their published meetings were. I couldn't find a list. What I could find is their calendar, but they're only like a month, like it's just this month. I looked at February, I couldn't see. I mean, you could make an assumption it's the second and fourth Monday, but
I think they're approving their annual calendar
soon.
Monday.
Oh, good. Yeah. So that would be great if you could check that out. What I do think is, the last one that was done was in November, the second meeting in November, and Dave did it. And so Donna, you'd be on for January, which if it is on the 28th, is that all right?
24th or 28th?
28th, it's the last, yeah, it's the last, the fourth. Yeah. If that's okay with you, and then you'd do maybe February, James?
Well, I still think the superintendent should do this, but if we're rotating, sure.
I mean, if that's, I mean, yeah, is there some reason why you think the
'Cause
superintendent
he's our
should?
liaison to the town, so.
Oh.
I don't have an issue with that, but I think that kind of contradicts what you were talking about before.
Of
and
us trying
working,
to
you know,
work with
so,
them.
I mean, I'm more than willing to do it, but I don't want to impact.
Good point. Yeah, I can do February.
Okay, if you can do February, and then I would do March, and then we can reconsider when our new member is on board. So I think the election is in March,
March
is it?
5th.
March 5th. Oh, so maybe
I will do it if a member cannot make, how's that?
I usually try to do it, yeah.
I also, remember I, events.
Yes, and I do think there has been
A
attempts
master
on the,
calendar?
yeah.
But I'll,
It is on which, on the main page.
On the main page.
On the main page.
And that's for everything.
everything that gets submitted, right? But we can,
Schools can edit it? Okay.
but we can make sure that it's accurate. I mean, right, that's the key, is to make sure that everything gets put on there.
So nothing falls through the cracks,
Yeah.
because I can't go on every single,
Yeah, I know.
and I know that on the main page, that not everything's on there,
Mm-hmm.
so.
Yeah, okay. So that was it for me. Outside of that, the next one is citizens' comments. Yep.
I just won't be here for the next meeting, so I just want to piggyback something the superintendent said. When you're looking at the ESSA scores, I testified publicly on 3 different occasions. One of the frustrating things being a teacher, let's say I did history class and they graded critical thinking, chronological order, argumentative essay, thesis development, but they're really lacking on synthesizing new concepts. So they have 5s and 4s all over the place, and this one I had to give them a 2 in because they're really not there yet and that's what we're working on. RIDE scoring system is you can score no higher than your lowest rating. So my testimony before them was that's asinine, excuse me.
Yeah, I didn't know that
My
either.
student has 5.544.2. You got a 2.
Oh,
So that's how you're scored. So when you're looking at this, what it said, we have many 4s and 5s, we ended up with 3 because our lowest rating in one.
oh, I see. Yes,
category
okay, I
is
got
a
that.
3.
I have heard that, yeah.
Your overall rating cannot be higher than your one lowest
Level.
rating. And I just wish, or I
Is it-
urge, or ask you to look at more. It always seems that because teachers are involved, because it's what we do every day, it seems like we're always whining and complaining, but I didn't know what the scores were gonna be. And I just looked at that and said, that's patently ridiculous. You know, you would never score a kid that way. You look at strengths and weaknesses, you do some type, it doesn't have to be an average, but you look at some holistic view. But school committees don't go, and towns don't go, and cities don't go. And now what I think is you're coming out like the Barringtons of the world, these Greenwich of the world, and nobody's looking good.
I know, that's what I was
And it's
surprised at, yeah.
because If you had
One cohort.
12 ratings and one of them, you just can't get higher overall than your lowest rating. So I just implore that, you know, school committees take a look at that too, and stop either writing in or testifying or just saying, wait a minute, if that's what you're gonna show the public, you need to define that to the public, and it's not.
Right.
So I'm not gonna be here next meeting, I have my own meetings on the fourth Thursdays, but
Right.
just an FYI on that.
Was that something kind of that was set up in No Child Left Behind, the same thing, right? I mean, if one of your cohorts, really could drive, it could really drive you down, I know that. That doesn't make sense, it should be averaged, yeah. No, it should,
Yeah, and we'll,
yeah, that's kind of weird.
but we'll go over that. I think I'm just trying to simplify it, though, that, the other thing too is that, we don't want to target, we want to be, again, be transparent, but, I don't want to just focus, you know, like there are districts, I'll say, there are districts out there you'll see in the newspaper that, you know, special ed costs are killing the budget, or that's the headline, right? And my feeling has always been that I never want to target blame a population or you know, use a headline like that. And so I think what I'll try to do is look at, you know, where we're at, and again, like what Mrs. Aronakis said, that's what the federal government has done, right? That rating scale is what ESSA is required. And we can talk about the different categories, but I just want to try to simplify, what it is, why where we're at, and the things, again, tie it back to all the other presentations that have led up to where we are today. And hopefully we believe those are going to make the difference and get us, as we move groups, and as Fred had mentioned before, moving those kids that are nearly meeting to meeting. And those are the things that we need to target on, because that's going to bring us from the 3s to the 4s. So the positive is that it was one area that dropped us down. Right. No, I get that.
I'm just saying that when you look at something holistically,
Right.
the fault could have been anywhere, but one fault to say that you can't score any higher than your lowest score is happening, it doesn't make sense.
Well, it knocked us down a rating. That's what it did. It ended up knocking us down, like automatically lost a star. So that was the key. But we'll talk. I mean, that's the whole idea, is just to put words on it tonight, but we'll talk about it the next time.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Pretty well took it out, I guess. Moving on to 18 then. Is there a motion to schedule our next meeting?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the next meeting of the school committee be scheduled for Thursday, January 24th, 2019, at 6 p.m. at Coventry Town Hall.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the meeting be adjourned at
9:31
p.m.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Yeah, just an hour.
An hour.
Thank you.